Right and wrong differ by culture. Right and wrong are not written in the stars, they are written in the minds of the people who live within a specific time, place, and culture. What one society celebrates as a noble act, another might condemn as a grave sin. In some places, speaking your mind is seen as bravery. In others, it's seen as dangerous disrespect. You can grow up being told a certain act is moral beyond question, only to step across a border and find that the very same act is considered immoral, even shameful. The realization can be jarring, like the ground shifting beneath your feet. This is the unsettling truth about morality. It's not an absolute force that exists independently of us. It's a living agreement, whispered from generation to generation, shaped by language, tradition, religion, and power. What your culture teaches you to believe isn't a universal law, it's a local consensus, and that consensus can vanish the moment you find yourself in another world, another set of rules, another version of truth. We inherit these rules without questioning them. As children, they feel as solid as the walls of our home, but travel far enough, listen long enough, and you begin to see cracks in that certainty. A behavior you thought was universally bad might be celebrated elsewhere. A punishment you thought was justice might be called cruelty by another tongue. When right and wrong shift from place to place, it forces a deep, almost haunting question into your mind. If morality can change with geography, was it ever truly moral at all, or was it simply what we were told to believe? Morals depend on context. Morality isn't carved into stone. It bends, twists, and reshapes itself depending on the situation you're in. An act that's considered noble in one moment can be condemned in another, even by the same people. Imagine stealing food. In a comfortable society, it's theft, a punishable offense. But in the midst of famine, when children's ribs show through their skin and desperation seeps into every breath, that same act can be seen as survival, even heroism. The lines blur, and suddenly the moral rules we thought were unshakable dissolve like mist. Context changes everything because morality is not a fixed truth. It's a living reaction to the circumstances around us. A soldier in war may be celebrated for taking a life in the name of protection, yet in times of peace, that same act is murder. A lie can destroy trust, but in the right moment, a lie can shield someone from unbearable pain. These contradictions aren't flaws in morality, they are its nature. Morals don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in the messy, unpredictable chaos of human life. We like to believe our moral compass points north, always steady, but the truth is, it's easily pulled by the magnetic force of need, fear, and emotion. You can swear you'd never do something until the situation changes, and when it does, the rules shift with it, leaving you to wonder if morality is truly about what's right, or simply about what fits the moment well enough for us to live with ourselves afterward. No universal moral truth. We grow up believing that somewhere, hidden beneath all the noise of opinion and tradition, there exists a single unshakable moral truth, a cosmic rulebook that applies to everyone, everywhere. But when you look closely, when you strip away the comforting illusion, you find nothing but 1,000 different versions of right, each claiming to be the only one. Every society writes its own commandments, carves its own laws into the hearts of its people, and calls them eternal. Yet, if they were truly eternal, why would they clash so violently? Why would they contradict one another so completely? Across the world, you see the fractures. One culture deems honor worth dying for, another calls it senseless pride. One nation enshrines individual freedom as sacred, another sacrifices it for the good of the community. Some see mercy as the highest virtue, others see justice as requiring its absence. If there were a universal moral truth, wouldn't we all feel it in our bones, the way we feel hunger or fear? Instead, morality shifts not only across borders, but across time. Yesterday's virtue can be today's crime. This realization is unsettling, even frightening. It means there is no divine referee to settle disputes, no ultimate answer waiting in the sky. It means morality is not a discovery, but a construction, a fragile agreement we cling to because without it, the world feels unbearably uncertain. And yet, that uncertainty is the truth. What we call right and wrong are not laws of nature. They are stories we tell, hoping everyone else will believe them too. Ethics change over time. What is moral today may one day be condemned, and what was once unthinkable can become ordinary. Ethics are not fixed. They are living, breathing creations that evolve with the tides of history. Look back just a few generations, and you'll see a world filled with practices that by today's standards feel unthinkable. Public executions as entertainment, slavery accepted as a natural order, women denied the right to speak or vote, children sent to labor instead of school. These weren't fringe ideas, they were the moral norms of their time, defended with absolute certainty. The unsettling truth is that the people who upheld those values didn't see themselves as cruel or unjust. They believed they were doing what was right. They looked at the world through the moral lens they inherited, just as we do now. And just as they could not imagine our values, we cannot predict what future generations will condemn in us. Perhaps they will see our treatment of animals as barbaric, our destruction of the planet as monstrous, our social divisions as a deep moral failure. Ethics shift because society shifts. Technology changes what is possible, culture changes what is acceptable, and necessity changes what is forgivable. Each era rewrites the moral code, not always toward justice, but always in motion. And when you realize that even the values you hold most sacred could one day be seen as outdated or wrong, it forces a chilling question into your mind. If ethics can change so easily, how do we ever know if we're truly on the right side of history? No culture's morals are superior. Every culture believes deep down that its moral code is the highest, the purest, the most civilized. It's an intoxicating belief that we've gotten it right while others are misguided or even barbaric. But when you step outside your own cultural walls and see the world through unfamiliar eyes, that certainty begins to crumble. The rituals, laws, and values you were taught to honor may look strange, even absurd, to someone raised elsewhere. And yet, from their perspective, it's your morals that are flawed, your customs that make no sense. This is the disquieting truth. Morality is not a universal ladder with some cultures higher and others lower. It's a vast and tangled web, each society weaving its own pattern and calling it the center. What one people call respect, another might call oppression. What one culture sees as justice, another sees as cruelty. Every moral system grows from the soil of its own history, religion, geography, and struggles. To declare one superior is to pretend that the human experience has only one valid shape, when in reality it has thousands. We hold to our moral code because it feels natural, even inevitable, but that's only because it's all we've known. Step far enough outside it, and you see the fragile truth. Superiority is an illusion born of familiarity. When we strip away the pride and the prejudice, we are left with something far more humbling. No culture's morals reign above the rest. They are simply different answers to the same ancient question: how should we live? Justice means different things. We speak of justice as if it were a single, unchanging force, pure, impartial, the same for all. But justice is not a fixed light shining over humanity. It is a mirror reflecting the values, fears, and priorities of the society that wields it. In one place, justice might mean restoring balance, bringing peace to the harmed and the wrongdoer alike. In another, it means punishment, swift, unforgiving, and public, to serve as a warning. There are cultures where justice is retribution, where blood must be paid with blood, and others where justice is reconciliation, where the highest good is to mend what was broken. What makes it more unsettling is that each version feels unquestionably right to those who live by it. A community that sees justice and mercy might look at executions with horror, while a society that values deterrence might see leniency as weakness. Even within a single country, the meaning of justice shifts between classes, between political beliefs, between the courtroom and the street. Justice bends with history too. Acts once punished with death may now barely earn a fine. Crimes once ignored are now moral outrages. And through it all, each generation believes their definition is the most righteous, the truest reflection of fairness. But when justice can point in opposite directions, depending on where you stand, you are forced to confront a haunting truth. Maybe justice has never been an absolute at all, only a story we tell to make our own vision of the world feel inevitable. People make moral rules. Every law, every code of ethics, every sacred commandment began as a thought in someone's mind. Morality is not a force that exists outside of humanity. It is built, brick, by people deciding what should be praised and what should be punished. Somewhere in the past, a group sat together and agreed, this is right, that is wrong. And over time, their agreement hardened into a rule, passed down so many times that it began to feel like it had always existed. But it hadn't. It was made. This is the uncomfortable reality. Our deepest moral convictions are not the voice of the universe, but the echoes of other humans. Some of those humans were wise and compassionate. Others were selfish, fearful, or cruel. Yet all of them left their fingerprints on the rules we live by today. And because people are flawed, so too are the moral codes they create. The moment you see morality as human-made, the ground shifts beneath you. The authority of right and wrong feels less like divine truth and more like a set of instructions someone wrote for reasons you may never fully know. It makes you wonder whose interests those rules were designed to serve. Were they written to protect the powerless or to keep them in line? Were they made for justice or for control? When you realize people make moral rules, it becomes impossible to see them as untouchable. They are not carved into eternity. They are pen marks on paper, waiting for someone brave enough to erase and rewrite them. Virtue varies by tradition. What one culture calls virtue, another may see as weakness or even vice. In some places, obedience to authority is the highest moral good, a sign of respect, discipline, and loyalty. In others, unquestioning obedience is seen as cowardice, and the real virtue is defiance in the face of unjust power. In one tradition, humility might mean speaking softly, never seeking the spotlight, and keeping one's opinions to oneself. In another, humility can coexist with boldness, where speaking truth loudly is a moral duty, no matter who it offends. Traditions don't just shape what we see as good, they shape how we express it. Generosity in one culture may mean giving freely without expecting recognition. In another, it may mean publicly giving so others are inspired to do the same. Honor, too, wears many faces. Sometimes it's bound to family loyalty, sometimes to personal integrity, sometimes to service for strangers you will never meet. What's praised in one land can be punished in another, and both sides will believe they are upholding the purest form of virtue. These differences are not small details. They are the foundation of how people live, love, and die. A person can spend their whole life chasing what they believe is moral excellence, only to discover that somewhere else in the world their life's work would be dismissed or even despised. And in that moment, the certainty of what it means to be a good person begins to crumble, leaving behind a haunting truth. Virtue is not a universal light we all see, but a torch passed down in the language, customs, and beliefs of those who raised us. Norms evolve. The rules that guide how we live, speak, dress, and treat one another are not set in stone. They are rivers, always moving, reshaping the landscape of society. What was once polite becomes outdated. What was once scandalous becomes ordinary, and what was once invisible suddenly becomes a public cause. Decades ago, a woman wearing pants in certain parts of the world could cause outrage. Today, it's so normal that the outrage itself would feel absurd. There was a time when interracial marriage was illegal, same-sex relationships were hidden in fear, and speaking out against authority could cost you everything. Those norms felt unshakable until they weren't. Norms evolve because we evolve. New generations inherit the rules of the old, but do not always keep them. They push, question, and break them when they no longer fit the world as it is. Technology changes how we connect and communicate, creating new behaviors that older rules never accounted for. Wars, revolutions, and cultural shifts rewrite the lines of what's acceptable, and soon the past begins to feel like a foreign country with its own strange code. But the unsettling part is this: the norms we live by now, so obvious, so right, are also temporary. One day they will be challenged, mocked, or discarded entirely, replaced by ideas we can't yet imagine. And when that happens, the things we defend fiercely today may become tomorrow's relics, reminders that nothing in human behavior stays the same for long. Norms don't stand still. They walk with us, changing step by step. Values come from upbringing. We like to think our morals are the result of deep, independent thought, that we chose them because they are right. But the truth is far more humbling, even unsettling. Most of what we believe is planted in us long before we ever learn to question. From the moment we are born, our families, communities, and cultures begin writing invisible scripts in our minds, teaching us what is admirable, what is shameful, what is worth fighting for, and what must never be touched. These lessons seep into us so quietly that by the time we are old enough to think for ourselves, we mistake them for our own conclusions. If you had been born in another country, in another faith, in another time, you would not believe what you believe now. You might see generosity as weakness or vengeance as sacred duty. You might treat authority with unquestioning obedience or with constant suspicion. You might think entirely different lives are worth protecting. Upbringing doesn't just give us values, it wraps them in emotion. We feel pride when we follow them, guilt when we betray them, and outrage when others reject them. That emotional weight makes them feel absolute, even when they are not. The most haunting part is how rarely we realize this. We think we are acting on timeless truths, when in reality we are carrying the imprint of voices from our childhood. And once you see that, it forces a painful question. If my values were given to me by accident of birth, what would I believe if I had been raised by someone else entirely? Good has no fixed meaning. We speak the word good as if everyone knows exactly what it means, as if it is a solid, unshakable truth. But good is not a constant. It bends and twists depending on who is speaking it, where they stand, and what they believe. In one place, good might mean obedience to tradition. In another, it might mean defying that same tradition for freedom's sake. One person calls a soldier good for defending the homeland, while another calls that same soldier a killer. The label changes not with the act itself, but with the eyes that judge it. The illusion is that good is pure, a universal beacon we can follow. In reality, it is a word soaked in perspective and shaped by power. Governments call their wars good. Leaders call their policies good. Entire cultures wrap their self-image in the belief that their way is the good way. But if everyone's version of good is different, who is right? The answer, if we dare to face it, may be no one, or perhaps everyone, depending on where you stand. History is littered with moments when good was used to justify horrors. Oppression has been called good for the sake of order. Conquest has been called good for the sake of progress. Even cruelty can wear the mask of good when enough people agree to see it that way. And once you realize that good has no fixed meaning, you begin to see the world not as a battle between good and evil, but as a battle between competing visions of what good should be. Morals depend on perspective. Two people can witness the same act and walk away with completely different judgments of it, one calling it righteous, the other calling it wrong. Perspective is the lens that colors every moral decision we make, and no two lenses are exactly alike. Our experiences, beliefs, fears, and desires all bend reality until what we see feels like truth. But truth itself can shift depending on where you stand. A soldier protecting their homeland may see their actions as heroic defense. The opposing side may see the same actions as ruthless aggression. Neither believes they are the villain. Perspective doesn't just alter how we see others, it alters how we see ourselves. People justify their choices by the stories they tell about them, stories shaped by personal struggles and cultural narratives. You might condemn a lie when you're the one deceived, yet defend it when it spares someone you love from pain. You might despise violence until you believe it's the only way to protect someone dear to you. The moral high ground feels steady only until life pushes you into the valley below, and suddenly your view changes. The frightening part is how deeply we trust our own perspective, forgetting it is only one angle of a vast, complex picture. We argue, we fight, we even go to war, convinced our moral vision is the clearest, never realizing that from another side, we are the ones in the wrong. And if morality can flip so easily, depending on where you stand, then perhaps it is not a fixed truth at all, but a shifting reflection of the eyes that look upon it. Groups decide what's right. Morality often feels like a personal compass, something we carry deep inside, guiding us toward what is right and away from what is wrong. But the truth is far more unsettling. Our sense of right is rarely born in isolation. It is shaped, molded, and enforced by the groups we belong to. Families, communities, religions, and nations whisper their rules into our minds until they feel like our own thoughts. Step outside those groups, and suddenly the moral compass spins differently. Groups decide what's right because belonging depends on agreement. We want acceptance, safety, and identity, and the cost of those things is often conformity. People have cheered for wars, condemned outsiders, or defended injustice, not because they were naturally cruel, but because the group told them it was necessary, even noble. When the crowd roars its approval, it drowns out the quiet doubts in your own mind. History is filled with moments when entire societies united behind moral codes that, in hindsight, make us shudder, but at the time, questioning them could mean losing everything: your reputation, your freedom, even your life. This is the dangerous beauty of group morality. It gives people a shared sense of purpose, but it also has the power to justify nearly anything. And when the group changes its mind, so do we. What you defend fiercely today may be something you condemn tomorrow, not because the act itself changed, but because the group decided it meant something different. In the end, right and wrong often live or die by consensus. Morality is local. We speak of morality as if it were a grand, universal law written across the sky, but in reality, it is far closer to home, woven into the streets we walk, the voices we grow up hearing, the customs we see every day. What is moral in one community can be irrelevant or even immoral just a few miles away. A gesture that signals deep respect in one place might be an insult in another. A way of living that feels natural in your hometown might be seen as strange, even offensive, somewhere else. Morality is shaped by the stories a community tells about itself, its heroes, its villains, its sacred rules, and its unforgivable sins. These stories are passed down quietly, not through textbooks, but through the tone of a parent's warning, the approval in a neighbor's smile, the shame in a teacher's voice. Over time, they become invisible boundaries that guide what we feel is right. The most disarming part is how absolute this all feels when you are inside it. You believe you are following truths that stand everywhere and always, but step outside your own circle, listen to the moral code of another place, and you might find that their truth feels just as natural to them as yours does to you. When morality is local, it means our sense of right and wrong is not carved into the fabric of the universe. It is carved into the culture we happen to inhabit, and that leaves a haunting possibility. If you had been born somewhere else, you might have lived your whole life defending a completely different version of right. Religions have different morals. Step into a church, a mosque, a temple, or a shrine, and you will find moral worlds that feel as real and absolute to their followers as the air they breathe. Each religion carries its own sacred laws, its own commandments, its own vision of what it means to live a righteous life. For one faith, drinking alcohol is a sin. For another, it is a ritual. In some traditions, certain foods are forbidden, while in others, those same foods are blessed and shared in celebration. Even the definitions of compassion, justice, and duty shift from one belief system to another. These differences are not small. They cut to the heart of what it means to be a good person. A behavior that earns you spiritual reward in one religion might earn you spiritual punishment in another. To the believer, their moral path is not just preferable, it is the only one that leads to truth. And yet, millions of people around the world follow different, equally certain paths that contradict one another at their very core. This reality can be deeply unsettling. If morality is given by God, why do His messages appear so differently across religions? Are we hearing the divine, or are we hearing the voices of human cultures shaping their gods to match their values? Faith offers unshakable moral clarity to its followers, but from the outside, that clarity fractures into 1,000 different truths. It leaves us with a haunting question. If salvation depends on morality, and morality depends on religion, what happens when the world can't agree on which version of God is speaking the truth? Customs shape ethics. The moral laws we live by are not born in isolation. They are carved out of the customs we inherit, the daily rituals and unspoken rules that surround us from birth. What your culture teaches you to do without question slowly becomes what you believe is right. You don't think about why you remove your shoes before entering a home or why you greet elders in a certain way. You just do it because it feels correct, almost sacred. Over time, these customs harden into ethics, and breaking them doesn't just seem strange, it feels wrong. Customs are powerful because they are invisible. You can go years without realizing that many of your moral instincts are actually cultural habits dressed up as universal truths. A simple act like eating with your hands might be a sign of respect in one place and a mark of disrespect in another. Public displays of affection might be seen as an expression of love in one culture and as indecency in another. People often confuse these norms with timeless, moral laws, but they are local rules born from climate, history, religion, and necessity that have grown into moral boundaries. This is why traveling or even meeting someone from a different background can feel like stepping into an alternate moral universe. Suddenly, you are confronted with the fact that the ethics you thought were absolute are, in fact, flexible, shaped and reshaped by customs that could have been completely different had you been born elsewhere. And when you see just how easily the definition of right and wrong can shift, it shakes the very foundation of what you once believed was certain. Killing can be moral or not. Few acts feel as universally condemned as taking another life. We're taught from childhood that killing is the ultimate wrong, a line that should never be crossed. And yet, history and everyday life tell a more complicated story, one where killing can be celebrated as heroic, necessary, even righteous, depending on who is doing it, why, and under what circumstances. A soldier who kills in battle may return home to parades and medals, praise for bravery. That same act committed in peacetime would bring handcuffs and shame. In some cultures, executing a murderer is seen as justice. In others, it's viewed as barbaric. Ending a life to protect an innocent can make someone a hero, while ending it for revenge can make them a villain. Though in another place or time, those roles might be reversed. The morality of killing bends under the weight of context. War, self-defense, mercy, punishment, each paints the act in different colors, transforming it from an atrocity into an honor or back again. And this is where the discomfort lies. If killing can be both moral and immoral, depending on circumstance, then morality itself is not absolute. It forces a chilling realization. Our judgment of life and death isn't rooted in some eternal truth, but in the shifting stories we tell about why it happened and who it served. One person's murderer is another's savior. One person's crime is another's duty. The act is the same, but the meaning and the morality are written by the hands of those who survive. Codes are culture-based. Every society carries its own moral code, an invisible rule book that dictates how people should live, speak, and treat one another. These codes feel unquestionable when you are raised inside them, as if they were written into the very fabric of reality. But they are not carved into the laws of nature. They are carved into the culture that creates them. What one culture demands as virtue, another may dismiss as meaningless. What one society punishes as shameful, another may celebrate as honorable. These codes are not born from universal truth, but from the needs, fears, and priorities of the people who invent them. In a harsh climate, survival may shape the code to value resourcefulness over generosity. In a religious society, divine authority may define every rule, while in a secular one, logic and law may hold that place. These differences do not exist because one group has found the true morality while others are lost. They exist because morality grows from the soil it's planted in. The most unsettling part is how deeply we internalize these codes without ever questioning their origin. We defend them passionately, even against those whose own codes were shaped by entirely different histories and struggles. And yet, if we had been born into their world, we would likely carry their rules instead, believing just as fiercely that ours were the only right way to live. When codes are culture-based, morality is not a constant. It is a reflection, showing us not what is universally true, but what our particular world has chosen to believe. Approval defines morality. From the time we are children, we learn to look for the approving nod, the warm smile, the reassuring words that tell us we've done something right. Approval is intoxicating. It feeds our sense of worth. It tells us we belong. But hidden within that comfort is a truth we rarely admit. Much of what we call morality is simply behavior that wins the approval of the people around us. We obey the rules that will keep us accepted, and we avoid the ones that will get us shunned. Entire moral codes are reinforced by the social rewards they promise and the punishments they threaten. A society can make almost anything moral if enough people agree to approve of it, and it can make almost anything immoral if enough people agree to reject it. This is why acts that were once praised, like public duels for honor, are now condemned, and why other acts once hated, like questioning authority, are now celebrated in some places. Approval shifts, and morality shifts with it. The dangerous part is how approval can make us blind. When the crowd cheers for something, it feels right, even if deep down we sense the harm it causes. When the people we admire or fear frown upon an action, we feel wrong for doing it, even if it causes no real harm at all. This is how societies have justified cruelty, oppression, and even genocide, because the stamp of approval turned moral horror into moral duty. And once you realize that approval defines morality, you're forced to ask, are your morals truly yours, or are they just the price of keeping your place in the crowd? Right is what's agreed on. Morality often feels like a force greater than us, as if it exists in the fabric of the universe. But in truth, right is usually nothing more than what enough people have agreed it should be. A law, a rule, a moral code. They all begin as an idea, proposed by someone and accepted by others until it becomes part of the collective reality. Once the majority embraces it, it stops feeling like opinion and starts feeling like truth. Yet strip away that agreement, and the truth crumbles. History is filled with moments when societies agreed on things we now find horrifying. There were times when slavery was not only legal, but praised as an economic necessity, times when burning someone alive was considered righteous justice. Those acts were defended not by a handful of extremists, but by entire communities that believed they were doing what was right, and they believed it because everyone around them agreed. Agreement has a strange power. It can turn cruelty into virtue and virtue into vice. When a society collectively decides something is moral, the pressure to conform is immense. To disagree is to risk being cast out, shamed, or punished. People begin to mistake consensus for truth, as if the number of voices on a side determines its righteousness. But when you realize that right is not a cosmic law, but a social contract, it becomes unsettling. It means that morality can shift overnight, not because truth has changed, but because the crowd has. And when the crowd moves, so too does the definition of what it means to be good. No belief is true for all. We like to think that if something is truly right, truly moral, it will be obvious to everyone, that deep down, all human beings share the same moral core. But look around the world, or even just through history, and you'll see the opposite. Beliefs that feel as natural as breathing to one person can seem absurd, offensive, or even dangerous to another. No matter how sacred a belief feels in your heart, somewhere there is someone who rejects it completely and lives their life as if you are the one who is wrong. Religions preach truths they call eternal, yet there are thousands of them, each contradicting the other. Political systems promise justice, yet their visions of fairness clash violently. Even ideas we think are unshakable, like freedom, equality, or loyalty, are interpreted in wildly different ways, shaped by the soil they grew from. The fact that no belief has ever been universally accepted isn't a small detail. It's a sign that truth, at least in the moral sense, is not a solid mountain, but a shifting landscape. This can be deeply unsettling because it strips away the comfort of certainty. If no belief is true for all, then we are left without a single undeniable moral anchor. We are left with competing stories, each claiming the throne, each convinced of its own righteousness. And in that chaos, the question becomes almost unbearable. If my beliefs are not universal, are they truly truth, or just the version of truth my world has taught me to defend? Language shapes morals. The words we grow up with do more than help us communicate. They quietly shape the way we think, feel, and judge what is right or wrong. Language is not just a tool for describing morality. It is the lens through which we see it. Some languages hold entire concepts of honor, shame, or duty that simply do not exist in others. A culture that has a dozen words for respect will notice and enforce respect in ways a culture with none cannot. When certain ideas cannot be spoken, they are harder to imagine. And when certain values are named and repeated, they become part of the moral air we breathe. Even subtle differences in words can shift entire moral judgments. A government may call an act collateral damage instead of civilian deaths, softening its moral weight. A community may label someone a martyr or a terrorist based on the story they tell, even if the person's actions are the same. The language wraps morality in emotion, making some actions feel noble, others unforgivable, simply by the words attached to them. This shaping begins early. As children, we absorb the phrases our families and teachers use to praise, scold, or warn us. Those words become the categories in which we sort the world. Without realizing it, our moral boundaries grow around the language we've inherited. The unsettling truth is that morality, which feels like a deep instinct, is often built from vocabulary. Change the language, and you can change the morals, quietly, invisibly, without ever telling people you've rewritten their code of right and wrong. Tradition decides. Long before you were born, before you could think for yourself or question the world, traditions were already waiting for you. Silent laws woven into the fabric of your culture. They told you how to speak, what to eat, how to dress, who to love, and who to fear. They decided what was honorable and what was shameful, what was worth celebrating and what was worth condemning. These rules felt natural because you never knew life without them. Yet they were not the laws of nature. They were the creations of generations before you, passed down like heirlooms, unquestioned because they came wrapped in the weight of history. Tradition has the power to sanctify anything. A ritual can be seen as sacred simply because it has been repeated for centuries, and injustice can be tolerated because it's always been that way. Morality, in this sense, is not born from universal truth, but from the momentum of time. Behaviors hardened into moral law through repetition. People cling to tradition not only out of respect, but out of fear. To reject it is to risk exile, ridicule, or even violence. And yet, the morality set by tradition is not immune to change. What one generation defends as a sacred custom, the next may see as cruelty or ignorance. But in its moment, tradition feels immovable, beyond question, like the very ground we stand on. That's the dangerous beauty of it. When tradition decides, it doesn't just shape what we believe is right or wrong, it makes those beliefs feel eternal, even when they are anything but. Taboos differ. Every society has its invisible fences, taboos that mark the boundaries of what must never be done, spoken, or even thought. To cross them is to invite shame, disgust, or exile. But what is forbidden in one culture might be perfectly normal, even celebrated, in another. Eating certain animals, showing skin, speaking certain words, these rules can seem as natural as breathing to the people who live by them. Yet step across a border and you may find those same sins are no sins at all. This is the strange and unnerving truth. Taboos are not universal. They are cultural inventions, passed down through generations until they feel like moral law. In one place, refusing to bow to an elder might be a shocking breach of respect. In another, bowing at all might be considered unnecessary or even insulting. A gesture, a meal, a relationship, what's sacred in one land can be scandalous in another. And the people in each society rarely see their taboos as negotiable. They see them as the very foundation of decency. The power of a taboo lies in its ability to shape not just behavior, but emotion. People don't simply follow taboos, they feel them deep in their bodies as instinctive disgust or outrage. That's why breaking one, even accidentally, can provoke a reaction that feels far greater than the act itself. But when you realize that these powerful feelings are built on cultural rules rather than universal truths, the effect is unsettling. It forces you to question whether the disgust you feel is rooted in morality or simply in the customs you've been taught never to cross. No global moral rules. We often speak as if there are moral laws that bind all of humanity, rules so self-evident that no culture, no person could ever deny them. But when you look closely, when you strip away the comforting illusion, you find that every so-called universal rule has been broken, reinterpreted, or rejected somewhere in the world. For every principle we hold sacred, there is a culture, a time, or a situation where it was not only ignored, but openly celebrated to do the opposite. Do not kill. Yet wars are fought, death penalties enforced, honor killings carried out, each justified by its own moral logic. Do not steal. Yet taking from the rich to feed the poor can be hailed as noble rebellion, value freedom, yet countless societies trade personal liberty for collective safety and call it wisdom. Even rules about honesty, fairness, and kindness bend under the weight of context, tradition, and survival. The absence of global moral rules doesn't mean humans are incapable of morality. It means morality is not a fixed set of instructions handed down from the heavens. It is a negotiation, a living agreement shaped by culture, history, and circumstance. And because those forces differ from place to place, the rules they produce differ too. This realization is uncomfortable because it robs us of the fantasy that there is a single moral truth we can lean on when the world becomes chaotic. Instead, we are left in a vast moral wilderness where every path is drawn by human hands and none are guaranteed to lead to the same destination. Sex norms vary. Few areas of morality reveal cultural differences as sharply as sex. What is considered pure, respectable, or shameful is not fixed. It is dictated by the culture you happen to be born into. In some societies, open discussion of sex is seen as healthy and natural. In others, even mentioning it is taboo. One culture may see modest dress as a sign of virtue, another may view it as unnecessary restraint. The age at which sex is acceptable, the expectations around marriage, the rights of partners, all of these shift dramatically across borders and time. What's most striking is how fiercely these norms are defended, as if they were self-evident truths handed down from the heavens. People often forget that their rules around sexuality are not universal. They are cultural constructions shaped by religion, tradition, economics, and even climate. A society built on arranged marriages might see casual dating as reckless and immoral. Another built on personal freedom might see arranged marriages as oppressive and outdated. These norms carry heavy emotional weight. They govern not only public behavior, but also private guilt, shame, and desire. They can dictate who is celebrated, who is condemned, and who is hidden away. And because sexuality is so deeply personal, breaking these norms can feel like a moral crime to those who uphold them. Yet, step into another culture, and you might see the same act judged completely differently, celebrated where it was once shamed, ignored where it was once punished. When sex norms vary so widely, it becomes clear that what we think of as moral in intimacy is often just a reflection of the society watching us. Justice is cultural. We like to imagine justice as a universal force, blind, pure, the same in every corner of the world. But justice doesn't live in some cosmic courtroom. It lives in the minds of people, and people are shaped by culture. What one society calls justice, another might call vengeance. In some places, justice means rehabilitation, the chance for a wrongdoer to make amends and return to society. In others, it means punishment, so severe that it serves as a warning to everyone else. The same crime can lead to forgiveness in one country and death in another. Every culture builds its idea of justice from its history, its fears, and its values. A society that has suffered generations of invasion may see justice as swift and unforgiving. A culture that prizes harmony may view justice as restoring balance, even if it means the wrongdoer never faces harsh punishment. These definitions are so deeply embedded that people rarely question them. They feel like moral truths, when in reality they are cultural agreements. This is why acts that feel perfectly just in one place can seem barbaric elsewhere. A public execution may be considered a moral duty in one country, while being seen as state cruelty in another. The concept of fairness itself bends to the will of tradition and belief, and once you see that justice is cultural, a chilling thought emerges. When two worlds collide, whose justice prevails? And more haunting still, does justice even exist at all? If it can be rewritten simply by crossing a border, context matters. An action is never just an action. It is a moment wrapped in circumstances, motives, and consequences that can change its moral meaning entirely. The same deed can be celebrated in one situation and condemned in another, not because the act itself is different, but because the story around it is. Saving a life by breaking the law can make you a hero or a criminal, depending on who is telling the story and what the situation demands. Context is the invisible frame that shapes every moral judgment. A lie told to cheat someone out of money is deceit. A lie told to protect someone from harm can be compassion. Taking a life in cold blood is murder. Taking a life in self-defense can be seen as justified. Even silence can be a virtue or a vice. Quiet dignity in one moment, cowardly complicity in another. These shifts aren't inconsistencies in morality. They are its reality. We like to believe moral rules are fixed and impartial, but in truth, we weigh them against the situation every time. We excuse or condemn based not only on the act, but on the pressures, fears, and stakes surrounding it. Context allows us to see the shades of gray between black and white, but it also reveals how fragile our moral certainty really is. When you begin to notice how dramatically context can transform right into wrong or wrong into right, it becomes impossible to see morality as a simple set of rules. Instead, it feels like a constant negotiation where every detail matters and nothing is ever as absolute as we want to believe. Cultures set conduct from the moment we are born. The culture we are raised in begins to shape us, teaching us how to speak, what to wear, when to smile, and what to believe is right or wrong. These rules of conduct feel natural, even instinctive, but they are not born from nature. They are created, refined, and enforced by the society around us. Every gesture, every courtesy, every boundary you think is just the way things are, is, in truth, a cultural design. In one country, looking someone directly in the eye is a sign of confidence. In another, it's seen as aggressive disrespect. In some societies, speaking openly about emotions is a sign of honesty. In others, it's seen as weakness or poor self-control. What earns praise in one part of the world can earn punishment in another, and yet within each culture, its rules feel like common sense. Cultures set conduct not just through explicit laws, but through the invisible weight of expectation. You learn quickly that breaking these unspoken rules can cost you reputation, opportunity, belonging. We conform not because we always agree, but because the human need to fit in is stronger than our instinct to rebel. The power of culture is that it doesn't just tell us what to do, it tells us what to want to do. It weaves morality into our identity so tightly that we can't always see where the culture ends and the self begins. And perhaps the most unsettling part is realizing that if you had been born elsewhere with different customs and values, the right conduct you defend today might have felt completely wrong. Morals are made by society. We like to imagine morality as an eternal truth, something that exists outside of us, waiting to be discovered. But the reality is far more fragile and far more human. Morals are not found, they are made. Every law we follow, every value we hold sacred, every act we call good or evil exists because people, at some point in history, decided it should be so. Society writes the rules and we inherit them as if they were carved into the fabric of the universe. These rules are born out of necessity, shaped by survival, power, religion, and collective memory. A society struggling to defend itself may elevate loyalty above compassion. One trying to heal from war may prize forgiveness over vengeance. Over time, these choices harden into truths so deeply rooted that people forget they were ever chosen at all. The most unsettling part is that societies can rewrite these morals just as easily as they created them. What was once a crime can become a right. What was once celebrated can be condemned. Generations change, leaders change, and the moral landscape shifts with them. Yet each new order believes its rules are the only correct ones. When you see that morals are made by society, a disturbing realization follows. The sense of right and wrong that feels so personal to you is not a universal compass, but a social agreement. And like any agreement, it can be broken, rewritten, or abandoned, leaving you to wonder if morality is anything more than the collective story we choose to tell. Rules fit local life. Every society writes its moral rules around the life it knows best. These rules grow out of the land, the climate, the struggles, and the needs of the people who live there. In a place where survival depends on the community working together, morality might emphasize sharing, loyalty, and obedience to the group. In a land where independence keeps you alive, morality might prize self-reliance, personal freedom, and the right to refuse. What is considered right or wrong is not random. It is tailored to the way of life that sustains that society. This is why a rule that feels sacred in one place can feel unnecessary or even harmful in another. A desert community may see wasting water as a moral crime. A river village may never think twice about it. A culture that survives by hunting might honor the taking of life as part of the natural order, while an agricultural society might see the same act as needless cruelty. The rules are not universal. They are shaped to fit the rhythms and realities of local life. We inherit these moral systems without realizing how practical their origins are. Over time, what began as survival strategies become moral commandments, defended as if they were eternal truths. But their foundation is not eternity. It is the soil, the weather, the dangers, and the resources of a particular place. And once you see that, it becomes clear. Morality is not born from the heavens, but from the ground beneath our feet, molded to fit the lives we live there. Religions demand different things. Around the world, billions of people wake each day guided by the moral codes of their faiths, yet those codes often contradict one another completely. What one religion commands as a sacred duty, another may forbid as a sin. In one faith, fasting is a path to spiritual purity. In another, feasting on holy days is the very expression of devotion. Some teach that salvation comes through obedience, others through questioning, others still through service or sacrifice. Each claims to hold the ultimate truth, yet those truths point in different directions. These differences aren't just abstract theology. They shape daily life. They dictate how people eat, dress, marry, raise children, treat strangers, and even think about life and death. To follow one religion's path can mean defying another's entirely, and the believers in each tradition don't usually see their rules as cultural preferences. They see them as divine law, unchangeable and eternal. That makes the clash between them all the more striking, because it suggests that morality, even when it feels sacred, is still filtered through human culture and history. For the faithful, these demands can feel as natural as breathing. They are not just rules, they are identity. But when you step outside that faith and look at the world, you see billions of others living by different commandments, equally convinced that theirs are the ones written by the hand of God. And in that moment, a question rises quietly but sharply. If divine morality can look so different from one place to another, is it truly divine? Or is it the echo of human voices calling it so? Truth changes with situation. We like to imagine truth as something solid, unshakable, an anchor in the chaos of life. But when it comes to morality, truth bends and shifts with the situation, like a shadow changing shape as the light moves. What feels unquestionably right in one moment can feel undeniably wrong in another. And the difference often has nothing to do with the act itself, but with the circumstances surrounding it. Take lying, for example. In most situations, we see it as a betrayal, an act that corrodes trust. But lie to protect someone from harm, and suddenly, it's not only forgivable, it's admirable. Killing in cold blood is murder, but killing to defend your child is called bravery. Even kindness can twist under certain conditions, becoming indulgence that enables harm rather than prevents it. The meaning of the act changes, and so does its moral truth. Situations have a way of rewriting morality because they force us to weigh competing values: life over honesty, safety over freedom, loyalty over fairness. In the heat of those choices, the rules we swore we'd never break can crumble in our hands, and we justify the new truth to ourselves because we must. This is what makes moral truth so slippery. It doesn't live in the act alone, but in the story we tell about why it happened. And when that story changes, when fear, love, or desperation twist the plot, the truth changes with it. What we call right or wrong is not a universal constant, but a shifting mirror reflecting the needs of the moment. Past morals may be wrong today. What one generation hails as virtue, the next may condemn as cruelty. History is littered with moral codes that once stood unquestioned, defended with pride, only to later be unmasked as deeply wrong. There were times when slavery was considered not only legal but moral, when public executions were a family spectacle, when denying rights to women or entire races was seen as natural order. The people who upheld these beliefs were not cartoon villains. They were ordinary men and women, convinced they were doing what was right. This is what makes the truth so unsettling. Morality feels timeless when you live inside it, but time has a way of shattering that illusion. What was justice to one era may look like oppression to another. Practices that once inspired honor may now evoke disgust. Even kindness can change form. What was considered generosity in the past might now be seen as condescension or control. These shifts don't happen because humanity suddenly discovers the real morality. They happen because societies change, values shift, and new voices demand to be heard. Technology, education, and exposure to different ways of life can turn yesterday's normal into today's outrage. The haunting part is realizing this cycle has not ended. If the morals of the past could crumble under the weight of time, then so can ours. Someday, the values we defend now may be viewed as backward, even cruel, and the certainty we feel today will be nothing more than another outdated chapter in history's moral ledger. Rights mean different things. We talk about rights as if they are universal, as if every human being is born carrying the same invisible list of freedoms and protections. But in truth, what counts as a right is decided by the society you're in, and those definitions can change drastically from one border to the next. In some countries, free speech is seen as the cornerstone of human dignity. In others, it is considered dangerous, something to be limited for the sake of order. One nation might see healthcare as a basic human right, while another treats it as a privilege to be earned. These differences run deep because rights are not handed down from the universe. They are created by people, shaped by culture, history, and power. A right exists only if enough people agree it does, and if those in power are willing to protect it. Without that agreement, a right is just a wish. Even the rights we consider most fundamental, like the right to life, are not applied equally everywhere. War, execution, and oppression have all been justified as exceptions, proof that even life itself can be treated as conditional. This is why one person's fight for their rights can be seen as rebellion in another part of the world. It's why the word freedom can ignite hope in one heart and suspicion in another. Rights do not mean the same thing everywhere because they are not universal truths. They are cultural contracts, and those contracts can be rewritten, denied, or erased entirely when the people in power decide that the definition has changed. Even basics are culture-bound. We like to believe that some moral truths are so obvious, so fundamental, that they transcend culture, that no matter where you go, certain things will always be right or wrong. But step into another land or another time, and you quickly see that even the basics are not immune to the pull of culture. What you've been taught since childhood as undeniable truth may be seen elsewhere as strange, optional, or even immoral. Consider the idea that all people are equal. In some societies, this is a bedrock principle. In others, hierarchy is not just accepted, but celebrated, woven into every interaction. Think about killing. Many assume it's a universal wrong, yet there are cultures and eras where killing in certain contexts is not only acceptable, but demanded, whether for honor, justice, or divine command. Even kindness itself can shift meaning. Offering help to a stranger might be praised as compassion in one place, yet seen as overstepping boundaries in another. The shock comes when you realize these aren't obscure differences. They are core values you may have assumed were human constants. Culture does not just shape the edges of morality, it defines the center. It decides which instincts are celebrated and which are condemned, which behaviors are rewarded and which are punished. Once you see that even the moral basics are written differently from one society to another, it unsettles the very idea of a shared human morality. It forces you to ask, if nothing is truly universal, then what is morality except the story our culture tells us until we believe it's the only one? Fairness differs. We speak of fairness as if it's a single, universal standard, a scale that balances the same way no matter where you are in the world. But fairness is not a fixed measure. It's a story each culture writes for itself. What one society calls just, another may see as deeply unjust. In some places, fairness means giving everyone the exact same share. In others, it means rewarding the hardest workers more. For some, it's about protecting the weak. For others, it's about honoring the strong. This is why two people can look at the same outcome and feel completely opposite emotions, one feeling vindicated, the other feeling betrayed. A system that feels fair in your eyes might look deeply crooked in someone else's, not because one of you is blind, but because you were taught to weigh justice differently. Even within the same culture, ideas of fairness can fracture. Parents, teachers, leaders, and communities, each shaping their own scales. The deeper truth is that fairness isn't an objective truth at all. It's a reflection of values, priorities, and survival strategies. A tribe that lives in scarcity may define fairness in terms of strict equality to keep the group alive. A wealthy, competitive society may define it in terms of merit, rewarding those who contribute most. Neither sees itself as unfair. Both are acting out the fairness their world demands. And so fairness is not a universal law. It is a shifting agreement, fragile and endlessly debated, always at risk of being rewritten when the needs of the people change. Politics shape morals. We like to think our morals are born from pure reason or unshakable truth, but politics has always had its hands on the steering wheel. Those in power, governments, leaders, ruling parties, do more than make laws. They shape what we believe is right and wrong. When a political system wants loyalty, it calls dissent immoral. When it needs unity, it elevates patriotism into a sacred virtue. When it seeks control, it defines obedience as moral duty and resistance as dangerous sin. Political influence seeps into our morality quietly, often without our noticing. Policies are framed as moral necessities, enemies are painted as evil, and allies as righteous. Even the language used, freedom, security, justice, is molded to fit the goals of those in power. Over time, these political narratives don't just guide laws, they guide consciences. People begin to feel genuine pride in following them, genuine shame in breaking them, even if those rules serve the few more than the many. History shows how malleable our sense of morality becomes when politics directs it. Wars are waged under the banner of moral duty, then condemned decades later as moral disasters. Oppression is justified as protection, inequality as tradition, cruelty as order. Each time, the public absorbs the message until it feels like common sense. The unsettling truth is that politics doesn't just enforce morality, it manufactures it. And once you realize that what feels like your own moral compass may be the echo of a political agenda, you are left wondering how much of your right and wrong was ever truly yours at all. Identity shapes ethics. The morals you hold most dear do not float freely in your mind. They are tied, often invisibly, to who you believe you are. Your identity is the lens through which you see the world, and that lens colors every judgment of right and wrong. If you see yourself as part of a nation, your ethics may prioritize loyalty and defense of that homeland. If you define yourself by a religion, your sense of morality will likely align with its teachings, even when they clash with secular views. If you see yourself as an individual above all else, your ethics may center on personal freedom, even if it means breaking the rules others live by. This is why two people can witness the same act and judge it completely differently, not because the act itself changes, but because their identities tell them what it means. A whistleblower might be a hero to someone whose identity values truth above loyalty, but a traitor to someone whose identity values loyalty above all. The moral verdict isn't born from the action, it's born from the self. And identity is not just personal, it's collective. The stories your culture tells you about who you are, your ancestry, your traditions, your place in the world, become the moral compass you carry. Change your identity, and your ethics often change with it. This is why some people, after leaving their homeland or community, find themselves rethinking everything they once thought was unquestionably right. When identity shifts, morality doesn't just bend, it can shatter, forcing you to rebuild your sense of right and wrong from the ground up. Communities set morals. The moral code you live by doesn't come from nowhere. It's forged in the collective mind of the community you belong to. From birth, you are surrounded by unspoken rules about how to speak, how to dress, how to treat others, and what is considered honorable or shameful. You absorb these standards without question because they are woven into the everyday life around you. They come from parents, teachers, neighbors, leaders, and they feel natural, as if they've always been there. But morals aren't handed down from the universe. They're shaped through countless conversations, customs, and shared experiences within a group. A community might decide that protecting family above all else is the highest virtue, even if it means breaking the law. Another might prize loyalty to the state, even at the expense of personal ties. Some define morality through religious commandments, others through civic duty, others still through the simple principle of live and let live. None of these are inherently universal. They are products of the group that agrees upon them. The most striking part is how fiercely communities defend their moral boundaries. To question them is to risk alienation, to mark yourself as an outsider. This pressure to conform is powerful enough to make people act against their own instincts, because belonging often feels more essential than being right. When you step outside your own community, you may encounter moral worlds that operate on entirely different rules, each one certain that theirs is the true path. And in that moment, you realize that morality is not an absolute truth handed down from the heavens, but a social contract signed, enforced, and rewritten by the people who live within it. Conscience is learned. We like to think our conscience is an inner voice we're born with, a pure, instinctive guide that knows right from wrong without anyone having to teach it. But the truth is far more unsettling. Your conscience is not a gift from nature, it's a product of training. From the moment you enter the world, family, culture, religion, and authority begin shaping that inner voice, teaching it what to praise and what to condemn. As a child, you might feel shame for speaking out of turn, pride for obeying without question, guilt for breaking a rule you didn't even understand. These emotions feel natural, but they are learned responses, planted and nurtured until they grow into the moral compass you believe is your own. Change the lessons, and the compass points somewhere else entirely. A person raised in one culture may feel deep moral outrage over something that barely registers as wrong in another. Someone taught that loyalty to family comes before all else may feel no guilt in lying to protect a relative, while another, taught that honesty is sacred, would see the same act as a betrayal. Both are following their conscience, yet both were shaped to feel what they feel. What makes this so powerful and dangerous is that once your conscience is formed, it doesn't feel learned. It feels true. You carry it like an invisible map of morality, unaware that if you had been born in another place, under another set of rules, that map would look entirely different. And perhaps the most disquieting thought of all is this: if your conscience can be taught, it can also be rewritten. Power affects morality. Morality bends under the weight of power. Those who hold it often have the ability not just to act outside the moral rules, but to redefine them entirely. When power is concentrated, whether in the hands of a ruler, a government, a corporation, or even a single charismatic figure, it can twist what a society sees as right and wrong to serve its own survival. Actions that would be condemned if done by the powerless are reframed as necessary, strategic, or even heroic when committed by those at the top. History is full of examples. Leaders declare wars in the name of justice while hiding motives of conquest or profit. Authorities create laws that protect their interests, then call it moral order. When the powerful need to justify harm, they don't abolish morality. They rewrite it. And the frightening part is how quickly people adapt, convincing themselves that these new rules are righteous simply because they come from authority. Power doesn't just reshape society's moral code, it can warp the moral instincts of the powerful themselves. With enough influence, they begin to see their own survival, reputation, or dominance as inherently moral goals. The rules stop applying to them, and in their place comes a belief that whatever they decide must be right because they decided it. This creates a dangerous loop. The more power someone has, the more they can define morality to protect that power. And once you see that moral law can be bent by those who hold control, it forces an unsettling realization. Sometimes what we call right is simply what the powerful have decided we must believe. Law isn't universal morality. It's tempting to believe that laws are the written form of morality, that they are the objective rules separating right from wrong. But laws are not born from some higher truth. They are made by people, enforced by power, and shaped by the culture that writes them. In one country, a law may protect freedom of speech as a sacred right. In another, the same speech is a criminal offense. What is legal in one place can be illegal in another, not because morality has changed, but because the law has. The danger is in forgetting this difference. We grow up learning that to break the law is to be wrong, but history is filled with moments when the law itself was the wrong. Slavery was once legal. Apartheid was once legal. The oppression of entire groups of people has been carried out under the blessing of the law. And yet, because it was legal, it was defended as moral. That confusion between legality and morality has allowed countless injustices to thrive unchecked. Laws do not exist to reflect universal goodness. They exist to maintain order as those in power define it. Sometimes that order protects the vulnerable. Other times it protects the powerful at the expense of justice. The truth is that a law can punish virtue and reward cruelty, depending entirely on who writes it. And when you realize that law isn't universal morality, the simple comfort of just follow the rules shatters, leaving you face to face with the harder question. When the law is wrong, do you obey it or defy it? Hospitality varies. Every culture has its own way of defining kindness to strangers, but what counts as hospitality in one place can feel cold or even invasive in another. In some parts of the world, the highest virtue is to open your home completely, feed a guest until they can eat no more. and insist they stay the night. Refusing such generosity is almost an insult. In other places, the kindest thing you can do is give someone their privacy, respect their independence, and keep your distance unless they ask for help. Both see themselves as being deeply hospitable, yet their definitions barely resemble each other. Hospitality is shaped by history, climate, and survival. In harsh environments, offering shelter and food to travelers was once a matter of life and death, and over centuries, it became a moral obligation, one that still carries deep symbolic weight. In bustling cities, where personal space is scarce and strangers are constant, hospitality may mean leaving people alone to protect their comfort. Neither version is inherently better. Each was born from the needs and values of its people. What's most striking is how quickly hospitality can shift from welcome to offense when you cross cultures. What feels warm and generous to you might feel overwhelming to someone else. What feels respectful to you might feel cold to them. And when the very same gesture can be read as kindness or rudeness depending on where you are, it reveals something unsettling. Even the simple act of making someone feel welcome is not a universal truth, but a moral choice shaped and limited by the world that taught you how to give. Traditions guide duty. Long before you can choose your own path, traditions begin whispering to you what your role should be, what is expected, what is honorable, what is shameful. They tell you who you should respect, who you should obey, what sacrifices you must make, and what you must never question. These traditions wrap around you like invisible threads, binding you to a sense of duty that feels as if it comes from deep within your soul. But in truth, it comes from the generations before you, carried forward like a sacred script. In one culture, duty may mean caring for your parents until their last breath, even at the cost of your own dreams. In another, it may mean leaving home to prove your independence. For some, it is a duty to protect the community's honor above personal happiness. For others, duty lies in defending personal freedom no matter the cost. These aren't instincts, they're inherited roles, shaped by centuries of repetition. Traditions guide duty, not just by telling you what to do, but by telling you who you are if you fail. They paint pictures of loyalty, sacrifice, and honor so vivid that stepping outside them feels like a betrayal, not only of your people, but of yourself. And so you follow, not always because you want to, but because the weight of tradition makes disobedience feel heavier than any consequence the outside world could impose. It is here that tradition's power is most haunting. It doesn't need to force you to fulfill your duty. It simply convinces you that you were born for it. Respect is defined locally. Respect feels like a universal virtue, something every human instinctively understands. But the truth is, what counts as respect can change completely depending on where you are. In one culture, speaking openly and honestly, even to elders, is a sign of trust and equality. In another, that same bluntness is seen as rudeness, a violation of the proper order. Bowing, shaking hands, making eye contact, avoiding eye contact. Each of these can be a gesture of deep respect in one place and a glaring insult in another. These rules are not arbitrary to the people who follow them. They are rooted in centuries of tradition, shaped by religion, history, and social structure. The way you address a teacher, the way you greet a stranger, the way you disagree with someone, all are coded with meaning that only makes sense inside that culture's boundaries. The emotional weight behind these norms is powerful. A respectful act in your own culture might feel completely natural, but in another, it could unintentionally offend or even humiliate someone. And when you are on the receiving end of this cultural clash, it's easy to misinterpret the other person's intentions, seeing disrespect where none was meant, or missing it entirely. This is what makes respect so slippery. It's not a fixed standard written into human nature, but a local agreement about what honor looks like. When you realize this, you start to see that your deepest gestures of courtesy might only be respectful to the audience that shares your version of the rulebook. Everywhere else, you're playing by different rules you didn't even know existed. Morals shift over time. The morals we hold today feel solid, like they've always been there, guiding humanity through the ages. But history tells a different story, one where right and wrong are not constant, but restless, shifting with the currents of culture, technology, and necessity. Acts once seen as noble are now condemned, while things once thought unthinkable are now celebrated. Centuries ago, public executions were entertainment. Not long ago, women couldn't vote, interracial marriage was banned, and entire populations were treated as property. These weren't fringe ideas, they were moral norms, defended passionately by the people of their time. What's unsettling is that those people didn't think of themselves as immoral. They believed they were upholding the highest virtues of their age, just as we do now, which means some of the morals we fiercely defend today may one day be seen as barbaric by future generations. They may look back at our treatment of animals, our environmental destruction, or our economic inequality and wonder how we could call ourselves good. Morals shift because the world changes. Wars are fought, movements rise, new technologies disrupt the way we live. With each change, society rewrites its moral code to match its new reality. The rules are never as eternal as they seem. They're rewritten in the ink of the present moment. And once you understand this, it plants an uneasy seed in your mind. If morality keeps changing, how can we ever be sure that what we believe today is truly right, or if it's just this century's version of truth? Virtue changes. What we call virtue is not fixed. It bends and reshapes itself with the passing of time, turning yesterday's moral ideal into today's outdated relic. Qualities once held up as the highest standard of goodness can, in another era, be questioned, mocked, or even condemned. Centuries ago, unquestioning obedience to authority was praised as a mark of strong character. Now, in many places, blind obedience is seen as weakness, and speaking out against power is celebrated as moral courage. In some ages, modesty was considered the purest form of virtue. In others, self-expression and boldness are praised as signs of integrity. Virtue changes because the world changes. New struggles demand new moral heroes, and old values are often left behind in the rush to adapt. Technological shifts, political revolutions, cultural awakenings, they all rewrite the moral script. What's considered noble in a time of war may be irrelevant or even harmful in a time of peace. Acts once dismissed as foolish rebellion can later be remembered as acts of visionary bravery. The unsettling part is how seamlessly these changes occur. People rarely notice the moment when virtue is redefined. They simply absorb the new version as if it had always been the standard. We grow up believing our idea of virtue is timeless, unaware that it too will one day be replaced by another. And when that happens, our heroes might be recast as villains, our cherished values seen as naive or harmful. The truth is hard to swallow. Virtue is not a constant beacon in the darkness, but a flame that changes color depending on who's holding it and when. Morals come from experience. We like to imagine that morals are something handed down to us, etched into our souls by nature, religion, or some cosmic truth. But for most of us, morality is not born in the abstract. It is forged in the furnace of lived experience. The rules we truly believe, the values we actually carry, are shaped less by what we're told and more by what we have endured, witnessed, and survived. A person who has known hunger may see sharing food as sacred, while someone who has never gone without might see it as optional generosity. Someone who has been betrayed might come to value loyalty above all else, while another, untouched by such pain, may treat loyalty as secondary to personal freedom. Every joy, every loss, every wound leaves an imprint, and over time, those imprints form a private moral code, one that no one else can fully replicate. Experience teaches us in ways rules never can. It can turn mercy into a reflex or harden us into cruelty. It can make honesty a non-negotiable virtue or teach us that sometimes survival requires silence and deception. And because no two lives are the same, no two moral codes are exactly alike, even among people raised in the same home. This is why morality feels so deeply personal, because it is. It grows with every choice we make, every risk we take, and every consequence we face. The most haunting part is that it never stops changing. A single moment, one heartbreak, one tragedy, one act of kindness can rewrite the rules you thought would guide you forever. Local law sets behavior. We often imagine morality as the force guiding laws, but in reality, laws often guide morality. What a society makes legal or illegal sends a powerful signal about what is acceptable, shaping the way people act, not always because they believe it is right, but because the law says it is. In one country, certain speech is protected as a sacred right. In another, the same words can mean prison. In one place, a harmless act might be celebrated, while in another, it's punished with severity. The reach of local law goes beyond fear of punishment. It molds belief. Over time, people begin to see legality and morality as the same thing. If something is permitted, they assume it must be good or at least harmless. If it is banned, they learn to see it as dangerous or wrong, even if they once thought otherwise. And when laws change, behavior changes with them, as if society's moral compass has been physically turned. History shows how dramatic this can be. Alcohol prohibition turned millions of ordinary citizens into criminals overnight. Legalizing same-sex marriage in some countries transformed public opinion in just a few years. What the law allows and forbids doesn't just shape actions, it rewrites norms. Changing what people feel in their gut is right or wrong. The unsettling part is realizing how fragile our moral instincts can be in the face of authority. Local law does more than set boundaries. It quietly redraws them until the edges of morality match the borders of the legal system we happen to live under. Morals fit culture. Morality doesn't float above humanity like a perfect light. It is built into the shape of the culture it comes from, molded to fit its values, fears, and needs. A society's morals grow from its stories, its struggles, its way of life. In a culture built on survival through community, morality might demand selflessness and obedience to the group. In a culture built on independence, morality might prize personal freedom, even when it clashes with collective good. The same action can be judged righteous in one place and shameful in another, not because human nature changes, but because culture does. These moral systems feel absolute to the people who live within them. They're taught from birth, reinforced through tradition, and wrapped in the authority of religion, law, and social approval. Few stop to ask whether their moral code is truly universal or simply the one that fits their world best. It's only when we step into another culture, when we see values so different from our own, that we feel the ground shift beneath us. Suddenly, what once felt like eternal truth begins to look like a local agreement. This is why cultures fiercely defend their morals. They are defending themselves, their identity, their way of being in the world. But when morals are shaped to fit culture, they are not fixed. They are changeable, fragile, and bound to the rise and fall of the very culture that created them. And once you see that, the idea of a single, unchanging morality begins to feel less like truth and more like a comforting illusion. No proof of universal ethics. We speak of morality as if it were a single, unshakable truth, something that exists outside of human opinion, waiting to be discovered like a law of physics. But when you look closely, there is no evidence, no irrefutable proof that universal ethics exist at all. Across cultures, across centuries, the moral rules shift like sand in the wind. What one society condemns as cruel, another defends as necessary. What one culture hails as sacred, another dismisses as meaningless ritual. If there were truly a universal moral code, why can't we find it written the same way in every human heart? Even the so-called obvious morals break down under scrutiny. We say killing is wrong, yet every society makes exceptions. War, self-defense, punishment, sacrifice. We say honesty is a virtue, yet lies are told to protect, to comfort, to survive. For every rule we think must be universal, there's a culture, a time, or a circumstance where it is bent, broken, or reversed entirely. And still, the people living under those rules believe just as deeply that their version of morality is the correct one. This isn't proof of moral chaos. It's proof that morality is human-made, shaped by need, shaped by fear, shaped by the stories we tell each other until they feel like absolute truth. Without a way to prove that any moral law applies to all people, everywhere, for all time, we're left with an unsettling possibility that what we call ethics may not be eternal truths, but agreements we cling to, hoping they are more than the fragile human inventions they appear to be. Societies choose morals. We often speak about morality as if it were discovered, like a precious truth dug up from the earth, eternal and unchanging. But morality is not found, it is chosen. Societies decide, through laws, traditions, and shared beliefs, what counts as right and what counts as wrong. These choices aren't random. They're shaped by the history, struggles, fears, and dreams of the people who live within them. But they are choices all the same, and choices can be made differently. One society may decide that individual freedom is sacred, even if it means tolerating inequality. Another may choose equality over personal liberty, believing the group's well-being matters more than the individual's desires. Some cultures elevate mercy as a supreme virtue, while others place justice or even vengeance at the heart of their moral code. None of these are inevitable truths. They are decisions that entire communities agree to live by. The power of this reality is also its danger. When a society chooses its morals, it can choose to protect the vulnerable or to justify oppression. It can write laws that uplift or laws that destroy and still claim both are right. And because we grow up inside these moral systems, they rarely feel like choices at all. They feel like nature, like common sense, like the only way the world could possibly be. Yet the moment a society shifts, through revolution, reform, or sheer necessity, its moral compass can swing in an entirely new direction. What was once called wrong becomes celebrated, and what was once celebrated becomes shameful, proving that morality is not fate, it is design. War and peace change ethics. The moral rules we live by in peace can collapse entirely in the shadow of war. Acts that would be unthinkable in ordinary life, taking a life, deceiving an enemy, destroying entire cities, can become not only acceptable but celebrated when survival is at stake. In wartime, killing can be called duty, deception can be called strategy, and sacrifice can be demanded in ways that would seem monstrous in peace. The very same actions that would earn you prison or shame in peacetime might earn you medals and honor on the battlefield. War does not simply suspend morality, it rewrites it. Leaders rally people with new definitions of courage, loyalty, and justice. In the chaos, cruelty can be reframed as necessity and mercy as weakness. The urgency of survival and the rallying cry of unity can silence moral doubts, replacing them with a fierce certainty that the rules must change for now. But for now can last years, and the scars it leaves on a nation's moral code can remain long after the fighting ends. Peace brings its own transformation. The urgency fades, and actions once praised can be judged harshly in hindsight. Soldiers who followed orders may face accusations. Leaders who promised safety may be condemned for their choices. Yet peace can also revive values war had buried: compassion, forgiveness, and the belief that life itself is sacred. When ethics shift so violently between war and peace, it forces a haunting realization. Morality is not an unbreakable law, but a set of rules written by the world's current state, and the world can change overnight. Harm is defined locally. We speak of harm as if it's obvious, as if everyone can see the wound and agree it's wrong. But harm is not a universal constant. It's a judgment shaped by the culture you live in. In one place, speaking harsh truths might be seen as an act of cruelty. In another, hiding the truth is what's considered harmful. Some societies see public shame as a justified tool for enforcing order, while others see it as a deep violation of dignity. What counts as harm depends on what a community values, fears, and seeks to protect. Even physical harm can be understood differently. In some cultures, corporal punishment is a moral necessity to teach discipline. In others, it is considered abuse. In certain communities, denying someone their voice or excluding them from decision-making is a grave moral injury. Elsewhere, it is simply the way things are done. This relativity means that the same act can be seen as protective in one place and damaging in another, not because the act changes, but because the moral lens changes. This is where it gets dangerous. If harm is defined locally, then power can decide what counts and what doesn't. Authorities can dismiss real suffering by claiming it's not harm according to tradition, or justify cruelty by reframing it as protection. And once you realize harm is not universally recognized, you're left with an uneasy truth. Whether your pain is seen, validated, and addressed depends not just on what you've endured, but on where and among whom you've endured it. Taboos are specific. Every society draws invisible lines, acts, words, and ideas so forbidden that crossing them feels unthinkable. These are taboos, and they carry an emotional weight far heavier than ordinary rules. But the striking thing is how specific they are to the culture that created them. What one group considers deeply offensive might not even register as unusual somewhere else. Eating certain animals, touching with the left hand, marrying outside the community. These acts can be met with horror in one place and complete indifference in another. Taboos don't survive because they're rational. They survive because they're woven into identity. They're taught from the moment we can understand fear and shame, passed down not just in words, but in the tone of a parent's voice, the gasp of a crowd, the coldness of silence when a line is crossed. They feel instinctive, as if they've always existed, yet they are nothing more than the moral fingerprints of a single culture, stamped into each generation. The power of a taboo lies in how deeply it embeds itself in emotion. People often react to a broken taboo with disgust or outrage before they even understand why. It's a gut punch, a reflex, and that's why they're so hard to question. To challenge a taboo feels like challenging the very core of who you are. But when you step outside your own culture and watch people live without the taboos you hold sacred, the shock can be disorienting. It forces a realization, both fascinating and unsettling. The rules you feel in your bones are not universal laws. They are local boundaries drawn by the people who came before you and enforced by the emotions they taught you to feel. Language changes morals. The words we use to describe the world don't just reflect reality, they shape it. Language frames how we think, what we notice, and most powerfully, what we believe is right or wrong. Change the words, and you can change the morality attached to an action. A soldier defends or invades, a leader protects freedom or restricts rights. Someone fights for justice or causes unrest. The events may be the same, but the moral meaning shifts with the language. Throughout history, entire moral codes have been bent or broken through careful wording. Euphemisms soften cruelty. Collateral damage hides civilian deaths. Enhanced interrogation disguises torture, re-education mass indoctrination. At the same time, charged language can turn neutral acts into moral crimes or acts of heroism, depending on the agenda. Words don't just describe morality, they assign it. This is why cultures with different languages can hold such different moral values, because each language encodes the world in unique ways. Some have dozens of words for concepts like honor or shame, making those ideas central to life. Others have no direct word for them at all, making them less morally significant. Even within the same language, shifting vocabulary can spark moral revolutions. Think of how terms for gender, relationships, or identity have evolved, bringing new moral conversations to the forefront. The unsettling truth is that morality is never entirely free from language's grip. Our sense of right and wrong lives partly in the words available to us, and when those words change, so does the moral landscape. Control the language, and you can quietly rewrite what people believe is moral without ever telling them you've done it. Economics shape morals. The state of a society's wealth or its struggle to survive quietly shapes what its people believe is right and wrong. In times of scarcity, morality often bends towards survival. Sharing may be praised as noble, but hoarding food for your own family can be seen as equally justifiable. Theft might be condemned in prosperity, yet in poverty, it can be understood, even excused, as necessity. When resources are limited, values like generosity and fairness can shrink, making way for rules that prioritize endurance over idealism. In times of abundance, morality often shifts in the opposite direction. With less pressure to survive, societies can afford to embrace broader notions of justice, equality, and compassion. Wealth can expand moral concern beyond the immediate family or community, creating space for movements that fight for rights, welfare, and environmental protection. Yet it can also breed its own distortions, turning greed into ambition, exploitation into smart business, and excess into a symbol of success. Economic systems themselves carry moral codes. Capitalism can frame competition as virtue and self-interest as a moral duty, while socialism can elevate collective welfare over individual gain. These aren't just policies, they seep into daily life, shaping what people admire, tolerate, or despise. The most unsettling part is how easily economics can tilt morality without us realizing it. When money is scarce, we call sacrifice noble. When money flows, we call indulgence deserved. And when the economy shifts, so does the moral ground beneath our feet, proving that what we call right often depends less on eternal truths than on the size of our wallets. Ideals match needs. The ideals a society holds up as moral perfection are rarely random. They are shaped to match what that society needs most to survive, thrive, or maintain control. If a nation depends on loyalty to keep its people united, it will glorify obedience and sacrifice for the greater good. If a culture thrives through innovation, it will elevate creativity, boldness, and the courage to break rules. These ideals are painted as timeless virtues, but in reality, they are tailored to serve the moment's demands. Look closely at history, and you'll see the pattern. During times of war, courage, honor, and discipline are praised above all else, not because they are inherently superior virtues, but because they are the tools a society needs to endure conflict. In times of peace and prosperity, compassion, tolerance, and personal expression rise to the forefront. Morality adapts like armor being reforged for a different battle, its shape dictated by the challenges of the age. This is why ideals shift so easily when needs change. The same culture that once demanded unquestioning loyalty may later celebrate rebellion, if rebellion is what it needs to survive. A society that once shamed wealth may begin to idolize it when economic growth becomes the goal. These changes don't feel like calculated adjustments. They're presented as moral evolution, as if the people suddenly discovered a higher truth. But the truth is simpler and perhaps more unsettling. Our highest ideals are often just reflections of our current survival strategy, dressed up as eternal virtues. No worldview fits all. Every culture, every philosophy, every religion builds its own map of the world, a framework of beliefs that explains what is right, what is wrong, and how life should be lived. Inside that map, everything makes sense. The moral rules fit together, the stories support them, and the people who share it nod in agreement. But step outside that map, and the picture changes. What feels like absolute truth in one worldview can seem strange, misguided, or even dangerous in another. The reason is simple yet unsettling. No worldview can contain the complexity of all human experience. A belief system may thrive in one environment and collapse in another. Principles that keep harmony in one culture can cause chaos in a different one. Values shaped by scarcity may clash violently with values shaped by abundance. Even within a single country, people can live in such different realities that their moral worlds barely overlap. We tend to assume that if only others could see things our way, they would understand. But the truth is, our way of seeing is built from a specific history, geography, and set of struggles. It's tailored to fit our own corner of existence, not the entire human story. And when you confront another worldview just as deeply believed, just as internally consistent, you realize that right and wrong are not universal coordinates. They're points on a map that changes depending on who's drawing it. The deeper you look, the harder it becomes to believe that any single worldview could ever fit everyone. The world is too vast, too fractured, and too full of perspectives that cannot be folded neatly into one frame. Geography affects morals. Where you are born shapes what you believe is right and wrong more than most people care to admit. Geography doesn't just determine the landscape outside your window, it determines the moral landscape inside your mind. The climate, resources, dangers, and isolation or connection of a place carve invisible lines into its culture, and those lines become the moral rules its people live by. A community in a harsh, unforgiving desert may value hospitality above almost anything else, because generosity to a stranger can mean the difference between life and death. In a crowded city, survival might depend on boundaries and personal space, making privacy and self-reliance moral imperatives. Coastal societies shaped by fishing may see sharing the catch as a duty, while landlocked agricultural ones may define fairness in terms of land use and harvest. Even the threat of natural disasters or the abundance of resources can tilt a culture toward cooperation or competition. These environmental pressures seep into tradition, law, and everyday expectations until they feel like timeless truths. But remove the geography, and those morals can change just as quickly as the landscape. When people migrate, their values shift, not because they lose their culture, but because a new environment demands a new moral strategy. The haunting truth is that many of the moral convictions people would die to defend are not ancient or divine. They are adaptations, survival tactics written by mountains, rivers, seasons, and soil. Change the ground beneath your feet, and you may find that the morals you thought were eternal begin to erode, replaced by new ones shaped by the world around you. Food rules differ. Few things reveal the relativity of morality as clearly as food. What one culture considers a delicious delicacy, another might see as deeply wrong or even disgusting. Eating beef is ordinary in some countries, yet sacredly forbidden in others. Pork can be a staple in one kitchen and an unthinkable sin in another. Some societies thrive on seafood that others wouldn't dare touch, while certain insects are prized in one region and reviled in another. These aren't just matters of taste. They are moral boundaries shaped by history, religion, and identity. Food rules are rarely neutral. They are tied to stories, rituals, and sacred beliefs. A forbidden food can symbolize impurity, disobedience, or disrespect to the divine. A required food can carry the weight of tradition and family honor. Breaking these rules is not just breaking a habit. It can feel like breaking faith with your people. That is why something as simple as refusing to eat what's offered can cause offense deep enough to fracture relationships. Even within the same culture, food morality can shift over time. What was once considered poor man's food might become a fashionable luxury. What was once common might be outlawed for ethical or environmental reasons. And in times of famine or war, rules that felt unshakable can be set aside in the name of survival. When you see how radically food rules differ, you begin to realize they are not written into human nature at all. They are recipes handed down by culture, spiced with belief and simmered in history. Rules we follow not because they are universal, but because they are ours. Revenge can be justice. We are taught to see revenge as something dark, impulsive, and dangerous. A raw hunger for payback that morality should rise above. But in some cultures, revenge is not only accepted, it is seen as a moral duty, a rightful balancing of the scales. To let a wrong go unanswered is to invite shame, weakness, and further harm. In these worlds, revenge is not chaos. It is order. It restores honor, mends the tear in the community's fabric, and tells the world that wrongdoing will not be tolerated. In places where the legal system cannot be trusted or does not exist, revenge becomes the only form of justice available. A blood feud to outsiders may seem barbaric. To those inside it, it is the natural law, a sacred cycle where harm must be repaid to restore balance. Even in societies that condemn revenge publicly, it lingers quietly in our instincts. Stories, films, and myths glorify the hero who avenges a fallen loved one. We cheer for them because deep down, we understand the satisfaction of seeing harm return to its source. The line between justice and revenge is thinner than we admit. Justice wears the mask of fairness, process, and neutrality. Revenge wears no mask. It is direct, personal, and emotional. Yet both spring from the same root, the need to right a wrong. And in some cultures, stripping away the mask is not a flaw, but a virtue. Here, revenge isn't a failure of morality. It is morality, raw and unfiltered, delivered by one's own hand when the world refuses to do it for you. Moral laws aren't natural. We often talk about morality as if it were a force of nature, like gravity, something that exists whether or not humans are around to name it. But when you strip away the illusion, you see that moral laws are not found in the wild. They are built, written, and enforced by people. Nature itself is indifferent. The universe doesn't punish the wolf for killing the deer or the storm for destroying a village. There is no cosmic courtroom handing out sentences. Moral laws live only where humans do, because they are our invention. This is what makes them both powerful and fragile. They bind entire societies together, guiding how we treat each other, defining justice, and shaping identity. But their source is not some universal force. It's the agreements we've made, agreements that change with time, place, and circumstance. What one generation calls justice, another might see as cruelty. What one society punishes, another might not even notice. These shifts happen not because morality evolves in nature, but because humans rewrite the rules. We cling to the idea that our moral code is natural because it feels safer that way. If morality is built into the fabric of the world, then it's solid, unshakable. But the truth is far more unsettling. If humans stopped believing in our moral laws tomorrow, they would vanish. They exist because we say they do. And once you understand that, you can't help but see every eternal rule for what it really is, a human choice dressed up to look like nature itself. Morals are ye human-made. We're often taught to believe that morals come from some higher, untouchable source, divine law, natural order, the universe itself. That belief is comforting because it makes morality feel permanent and unquestionable. But the truth is more fragile and far more unsettling. Morals are not discovered, they are invented. They are the creations of human minds, written and rewritten over centuries, shaped by fear, hope, power, and survival. Every moral law you've ever known was decided by people with their own biases, ambitions, and blind spots. The idea that lying is wrong, that loyalty is good, that theft is bad, didn't fall from the sky. It emerged from countless conversations, arguments, and decisions within communities trying to figure out how to live together. And because humans created them, morals have never been flawless. They've been used to justify slavery, war, and cruelty as easily as they've been used to protect the weak and promote kindness. What makes this truth so powerful and dangerous is that if humans made morality, humans can change it. It is not set in stone, no matter how many times we pretend it is. The rules you live by now are the result of people agreeing they should exist, and if enough people decide otherwise, those rules can vanish overnight. This doesn't make morality meaningless. It makes it deeply human, but it also strips away the illusion of eternal truth. What we call right and wrong are simply ideas we've agreed upon, fragile agreements that exist only as long as we keep believing in them, and the moment we stop, they disappear. Roles change duties. What is right for one person can be wrong for another, simply because of the role they hold. A parent's duty to protect their child can mean hiding truths that a teacher would be obligated to reveal. A soldier may be praised for following orders that a civilian would be condemned for obeying. A doctor's ethical code demands saving every life possible, while a judge's duty may require passing a sentence that ends one. Morality is not always a single set of rules. It is a shifting map where the path depends on the position you occupy. These roles are built into the structure of society, each with its own expectations, privileges, and moral burdens. The priest is called to forgive where the prosecutor is called to punish. The leader is expected to sacrifice individuals for the good of the group, while the friend is expected to put the individual first. In one role, silence may be loyalty. In another, it may be complicity. This shifting duty is not hypocrisy, it is the way societies distribute responsibility. But it can feel jarring when we step out of one role into another and suddenly find our moral compass pointing in a different direction. A soldier returning from war must learn the ethics of peace. A child becoming a parent inherits duties they once rebelled against. The unsettling truth is that morality isn't just shaped by what you believe. It is shaped by the role you are allowed or forced to play. And the rules of that role can change everything about what you owe to others and what they owe to you. Beauty and morals differ. Beauty draws us in with instinct, but morality is taught to us by culture, and the two do not always agree. What is considered beautiful can inspire desire, admiration, even longing, while what is considered moral can demand restraint, humility, or rejection of that very same beauty. In one society, the display of physical beauty might be celebrated as confidence and self-expression. In another, it might be condemned as vanity or indecency. A work of art might be hailed as a masterpiece in one place, yet banned as immoral in another, not because the image itself changes, but because the values looking at it do. Beauty is often universal in its emotional pull. Symmetry, grace, color, and vitality speak to something deep in human nature. Morality, however, is not universal. It sets boundaries around beauty, deciding who is allowed to show it, who is allowed to enjoy it, and when its presence becomes a sin. These moral judgments don't arise from beauty itself. They arise from the fears, traditions, and priorities of the culture making the judgment. This clash can create tension inside us. We might feel the pull of beauty, while also feeling the weight of moral disapproval. We might condemn something publicly while secretly admiring it, or defend something beautiful that others around us see as corrupting. And in those moments, the truth becomes clear. Beauty does not tell us what is right or wrong. It simply exists, stirring something primal in us, while morality stands beside it, trying to decide whether to celebrate it, control it, or bury it away. Honor varies. Honor feels like one of those timeless virtues, something every culture must value in the same way. But step into another society or even another era, and you'll find that what counts as honor can be unrecognizable. In one culture, honor might mean protecting your family's name at all costs, even if it requires vengeance or violence. In another, it might mean refusing violence altogether, proving dignity through restraint and forgiveness. Some see honor in dying for a cause. Others see the highest honor in living to rebuild after the cause is lost. These differences aren't small. They are shaped by centuries of history, struggle, and survival. In warrior societies, honor often means courage in battle and loyalty to comrades. In merchant cultures, it may be tied to honesty in trade and keeping one's word. In spiritual traditions, honor might be linked to purity, devotion, or service to others. And each of these worlds believes theirs is the truest expression of the word. Honor is powerful because it isn't just about rules, it's about identity. It's the invisible currency of respect, the thing people will risk their lives to protect. Yet when you see how completely its definition changes from place to place, it forces a realization that can be hard to swallow. Honor is not a universal code. It is a mirror reflecting the values of the culture that created it. And once you see that, you understand why two people can both act with honor, yet see each other as deeply dishonorable, because they are playing by entirely different rules. Tech changes morals. Every major leap in technology doesn't just change how we live, it changes what we believe is right and wrong. New inventions rewrite the rules of daily life, forcing societies to face moral questions they never had to answer before. When the printing press emerged, it sparked debates about who should control information. When birth control became accessible, it ignited moral battles over sex, family, and freedom. When social media appeared, it reshaped ideas of privacy, truth, and even kindness. Technology pulls morality into uncharted territory because it creates possibilities that never existed. Before nuclear weapons, there was no moral dilemma about wiping out entire cities in seconds. Before artificial intelligence, there was no question about whether machines could make decisions that affect human lives. With every breakthrough, the moral landscape shifts, not because humans suddenly become more ethical or less, but because the boundaries of what's possible have moved. The most unsettling part is how fast it happens. Moral norms built over centuries can be upended in a decade when technology changes the way we work, connect, or survive. Acts once considered impossible become common. Behaviors once seen as harmless become dangerous. Our ethics scramble to catch up, but technology rarely waits. This means that morality is never as timeless as we think. It's tethered to the tools we use. And as those tools evolve faster and faster, so too does the definition of right and wrong. The phone in your pocket, the algorithms deciding what you see, the machines quietly replacing human labor, they're not just changing your habits, they're changing your morality, whether you notice it or not. Debates are culture-based. The arguments a society has about right and wrong are not random. They are born from its culture. What people fight over, protest about, or passionately defend reflects the values their world has taught them to prize. In one country, the great moral battle might be over freedom of speech. In another, it might be over obedience to tradition. One culture may rage about the ethics of wealth and inequality, while another focuses on honor, family duty, or religious purity. These debates don't emerge from some universal list of moral priorities. They grow from the soil of a specific history, language, and way of life. Even the sides of the debate are shaped by culture. What counts as a liberal or conservative position in one society might be meaningless or reversed in another. An argument that feels urgent and emotional in your country might seem trivial or even baffling to someone from a different background. This cultural framing is why moral debates can be so polarizing. People aren't just disagreeing on facts, they're speaking from entirely different moral blueprints. When your culture has trained you to see one value as sacred, any challenge to it feels like an attack on your very identity. The most striking part is how invisible this influence feels when you're inside it. The debates of your own culture seem obvious, necessary, even inevitable. But step outside and you'll see an entirely different set of moral battlegrounds. Proof that our most passionate ethical arguments are not universal struggles, but local conversations written in the language of our culture. Time changes norms. The rules we live by feel permanent while we're in them, but time has a way of erasing certainties and replacing them with new ones. Norms, the unwritten rules that govern how we behave, speak, dress, love, and judge, are not fixed. They shift like sand under the tide of history. What once felt proper, respectable, and unquestionable can become outdated, laughable, or even offensive in just a generation. 100 years ago, clothing that revealed ankles could cause scandal. Today, that same outrage feels absurd, but in its time, it was moral truth. Norms change because society changes. Technology reshapes how we connect. Wars and revolutions rewrite what is acceptable, and cultural exchanges introduce values that blend, clash, or replace the old. The transformation is so gradual that most people don't notice it happening until they look back and realize how much they've changed without even meaning to. What's unsettling is that right now, in this very moment, we are living inside norms that future generations may find backwards or cruel. The ways we treat the environment, the poor, or the vulnerable might be the moral embarrassments our descendants read about in disbelief, and we will have thought ourselves just, modern, and enlightened, just as people before us did. Time changes norms, not because the universe updates its rules, but because humanity does. And the fact that we can watch morality reinvent itself over and over raises a haunting question. How much of what we call right today is simply this era's fashion in ethics? Heroes differ. Every society tells stories of its heroes, figures who embody the highest ideals, who stand as proof of what it means to live with courage, honor, and virtue. But the unsettling truth is that heroes are not universal. The person one culture celebrates as a savior, another might see as a villain. A revolutionary who frees their people in one history book can be branded a dangerous criminal in another. The same deeds, bravery, sacrifice, defiance, can inspire awe in one land and fear or hatred in another. Heroes are shaped by the values of the culture that crowns them. In some places, a hero is the loyal soldier who follows orders without question. In others, it's the rebel who refuses to obey unjust laws. One society might honor those who die in battle, another might honor those who refuse to fight at all. Even within the same culture, time can rewrite the list of who counts as heroic. Yesterday's outlaw can become tomorrow's legend, and yesterday's legend can fade into disgrace. This shifting definition reveals something many people never want to admit. Heroism isn't a fixed set of qualities, but a reflection of what a community values in a given moment. And because values change, so do heroes. That's why someone who is revered in their own homeland can be hated abroad, and why history is littered with statues torn down and new ones raised in their place. The hero is never just the person, they are the story told about them, and that story depends entirely on who's telling it. No rule works everywhere. We like to believe that certain moral rules are universal, that somewhere there are lines no human being would ever cross, and principles no society would ever abandon. But the reality is harsher. Every moral rule, no matter how sacred it feels, will break under the right circumstances or in the right place. What is praised in one culture can be punished in another, and what is seen as unforgivable here may be celebrated somewhere else. Consider honesty. In many societies, telling the truth is a core virtue, but in others, withholding the truth or even lying outright is considered kindness, diplomacy, or protection. Killing is condemned as murder unless it's done in war, in defense, or as justice under the law. Even generosity, a value almost everyone claims to honor, can be frowned upon when it disrupts hierarchy, challenges tradition, or creates dependence. The deeper you look, the more you realize that moral rules are not eternal commandments, but flexible strategies adapted to specific environments, histories, and needs. And because those conditions change, the rules change with them. This doesn't just happen across cultures, it happens over time within the same one. A rule that fit the world perfectly a century ago might feel cruel or absurd today. What makes this truth so unsettling is the realization that the moral laws you believe should apply to everyone, everywhere, simply don't. There is no code immune to the pull of context, no principle that stands untouched by geography, necessity, or power. Morality is not a perfect map. It is a shifting network of paths, each one leading somewhere different. Moral diversity is normal. It's easy to believe that deep down, everyone shares the same moral compass, that if we stripped away the differences of language, religion, and politics, we'd all agree on what's right and wrong. But step outside your own world for even a moment, and you'll see that moral diversity is not the exception, it's the rule. Across cultures, communities, and even families, people live by entirely different codes, each convinced theirs is the correct one. One society may see individual freedom as the highest good, while another sees duty to the group as more important. One may see vengeance as justice, another as a poison to be avoided at all costs. Some cultures consider strict gender roles moral order, others see them as oppression. These differences aren't rare, they're everywhere, woven into how people speak, love, punish, and celebrate. The remarkable part is how normal this feels to those within each system. Most people don't walk around feeling morally diverse. They feel right, their values seem self-evident, their way of life natural. It's only when confronted with a completely different moral world that the illusion cracks, and we see that what we took as human truth is often just cultural truth. This diversity can be beautiful, offering countless ways to understand humanity, but it can also be a source of conflict because when someone's moral world clashes with yours, it doesn't just feel like disagreement, it feels like a threat to what you believe life should be. And once you realize moral diversity is the norm, you can't help but wonder if right and wrong have ever been as universal as we were taught to believe. Tolerance comes from difference. Tolerance is not born in comfort. It is forged in the heat of difference. You cannot learn to accept what you have never had to face. When everyone around you looks the same, speaks the same, believes the same, it is easy to mistake sameness for harmony. But true tolerance emerges only when your world collides with something unfamiliar, something that challenges the rules you thought were absolute. Difference tests the boundaries of morality. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that the values you were taught as self-evident may not be shared by others. You meet someone whose way of life is so unlike your own that it first feels wrong, even threatening. And in that moment, you have a choice. Cling to the safety of judgment or step into the uncertainty of understanding. For many, this is the point where tolerance begins, not in agreement, but in the decision to let others exist without demanding they become like you. This is why diverse societies often have more developed ideas of tolerance. They live every day with competing beliefs, languages, and customs. Difference becomes ordinary, and ordinary becomes acceptable. But tolerance is fragile. It can vanish in times of fear when people retreat into the familiar and see difference as danger again. Without difference, tolerance is just a word we use for politeness. With difference, it becomes a moral choice, a deliberate act of allowing space for another reality to exist beside our own, even when it shakes the foundations of what we thought was right. Families have different duties. We often assume that family duty is a universal concept, that everywhere in the world, the bonds between parents, children, and relatives are guided by the same moral rules. But when you look closer, you see that what counts as a good son, daughter, parent, or sibling varies wildly from culture to culture. In some places, children are expected to care for their parents into old age, even at great personal sacrifice. In others, independence is seen as the ultimate gift a parent can give, and relying on your children is viewed as a failure. In certain societies, loyalty to family outweighs loyalty to law or community, making it a moral obligation to protect relatives no matter what they've done. Elsewhere, the highest duty is fairness, even if it means standing against your own blood. Some cultures expect adult children to live near or with their parents for life, while others expect them to move away, build their own households, and create distance as a sign of maturity. These differences run deep, shaping not only family structures, but personal identity. The very way you measure your worth as a child, a parent, or a sibling is tied to the rules you were raised with. What feels like love and responsibility to you might feel like control or burden to someone from another tradition. The striking truth is that there is no single blueprint for family morality. Each culture writes its own script for what family members owe one another, and those scripts can be so different that what is seen as devotion in one place might be seen as selfishness or even betrayal in another. Elder respect varies. In some cultures, elders are treated as living treasures, keepers of wisdom, history, and tradition. Their words carry weight, their presence commands deference, and caring for them is seen as one of life's highest duties. To speak against an elder, to ignore their guidance, would be considered a deep moral failing. In these places, age is synonymous with honor, and the older someone grows, the more they are revered. But travel elsewhere, and you may find the opposite. In some societies, youth is prized above all, and the old are quietly pushed aside, seen as out of touch or even burdensome. Decisions are made without them, their stories left untold, their needs often neglected. Respect, if given, is polite but shallow, rooted more in obligation than genuine value. This divide is not random. It grows from the soil of each society's priorities. In cultures where tradition and continuity are essential for survival, elders are the guardians of collective memory. In fast-moving, innovation-driven cultures, change can be valued more than preservation, and age can be seen as a barrier rather than a gift. What makes this so revealing is that neither approach is universal truth. It's morality molded by circumstance. The same act, deferring to an elder or challenging them, can be seen as moral strength in one place and moral weakness in another. And so, respect for elders isn't an unshakable rule. It's a choice each culture makes, shaped by how it views the past, the present, and who it trusts to shape the future. Morality is learned. We like to imagine morality as something we're born with, a quiet voice inside us that knows good from evil without being told. But the truth is far more fragile. Morality is taught. From the moment we open our eyes, the people around us begin shaping our sense of right and wrong through praise, punishment, stories, and example. A child learns that sharing is good not because they instinctively know it, but because their parents reward it. They learn lying is bad because someone scolds them, or because they feel the sting of lost trust. The lessons aren't just in words, they're in everything we see. We watch how our families treat strangers, how our friends react to rules, how our community honors its heroes or shuns its outcasts. Over time, these patterns sink into us until they feel like instincts. But they are not instincts, they are conditioning. This is why morality looks so different across the world. A child raised in a war zone learns a different moral code than one raised in peace. A child brought up in a strict religious household may see morality through the lens of faith, while one in a secular environment may see it through reason or law. Neither is born with their code. They are taught it piece by piece until it feels like part of their very nature. The unsettling truth is that if you had been born into a different family, a different country, a different era, your moral instincts would almost certainly be different too. And that means the voice you trust to guide you may be less an inner truth and more an echo of the people who taught you how to live. Truth rules vary. We like to imagine truth as a pure and universal thing, untouched by opinion or culture. But in reality, even truth has rules, and those rules are not the same everywhere. In one society, telling the blunt, unvarnished truth is considered a moral duty, no matter how much it hurts. In another, truth is weighed against kindness, and withholding it to spare someone pain is not only accepted, but expected. What counts as honest or dishonest depends not just on facts, but on the values of the people speaking them. Some cultures prize directness, believing that trust is built on transparency, even if the words cut deep. Others value harmony above all else, bending or softening the truth to keep peace within the group. A lie in one context can be seen as a betrayal. In another, it can be a moral act of protection. These differences aren't just personal. They are woven into laws, customs, and social expectations. Even the way truth is proven changes from place to place. In some societies, written contracts are sacred. In others, a person's word carries more weight than paper. In one courtroom, emotional testimony may be trusted. In another, it is dismissed as unreliable. Truth is filtered through the lens of culture, which means there is no single global rule book for honesty. Once you see this, you realize that telling the truth is never just about facts. It's about following the truth rules of the world you're standing in. And when those rules change, so does the very meaning of what it means to be honest. Gender roles affect morals. From the moment we are born, the expectations placed on us often depend on whether we are seen as male or female, and those expectations don't just shape behavior, they shape morality itself. In many cultures, the rules for what is right or wrong change depending on gender. A man might be praised for boldness and independence, while a woman showing the same traits could be judged as improper or unfeminine. A woman might be celebrated for selflessness and care, while a man showing those qualities might be told he is weak. These double standards are not just social quirks. They define moral worth in different ways for different genders. In some societies, women are told their highest moral duty is to protect family honor, often through modesty and obedience, while men are told theirs is to defend and provide, often through strength and dominance. In others, the roles are reversed or blurred, but the moral expectations are still tied to gendered ideas of who we should be. What's more, these gendered moral codes can shift over time. Qualities once praised in women, like silence and submission, may come to be criticized as oppression, while traits once discouraged in men, like empathy and vulnerability, may be redefined as virtues. Yet even when the specific rules change, the idea that morality depends on gender remains deeply embedded in many cultures. The result is that people can be judged not only by what they do, but by whether they're allowed to do it based on gender. And when morality itself bends around these roles, it becomes clear that what's considered virtuous or shameful is not just about the act, it's about who's doing it. Law morality. It's tempting to believe that if something is legal, it must also be moral, that the law is the ultimate guide to what's right and wrong. But the truth is, law and morality often walk separate paths, sometimes running in parallel, other times in direct opposition. History is filled with laws that defended injustice. Slavery was legal, segregation was legal, child labor was legal. Entire systems of cruelty were upheld by governments that claimed to serve justice. And in those times, breaking the law could be the most moral act a person could commit. Law is a creation of human institutions, shaped by politics, power, and compromise. It can protect the vulnerable, but it can also protect the interests of the powerful. Morality, on the other hand, is shaped by conscience, culture, and personal conviction, and it often demands more than the law requires, or something entirely different. There are things you can do without breaking a single rule that would still make you deeply wrong in the eyes of others, and there are acts that might break the law but win the respect of those who value justice above legality. The danger lies in confusing legality with righteousness. A society can wrap its injustices in official documents, courtrooms, and stamps of approval, making them feel legitimate. But when you strip away the legal language, you may find nothing but moral emptiness beneath. And when that happens, you're faced with a choice: obey the law or obey your conscience, knowing the two don't always lead to the same place. Rituals hold morals. Rituals are more than repeated actions. They are vessels carrying the moral code of a culture, hidden in gestures, words, and traditions so familiar we often stop seeing them. They tell people how to behave, what to value, and where to draw the line between right and wrong, all without ever needing to say the word morality. A wedding ceremony, for example, is not just a celebration of love. It is a declaration of what the community considers a proper union, who may enter it, and under what conditions. A funeral isn't only about grief. It reflects what a culture believes about respect, legacy, and the sanctity of life. Rituals make morality tangible. They take abstract ideas, honor, loyalty, purity, gratitude, and turn them into actions you can see and touch. Sharing a meal at a holiday gathering reinforces generosity and unity. Standing in silence at a memorial teaches reverence for the past. Even small, everyday rituals, like greetings or blessings before meals, quietly uphold the values a society wants to preserve. Because rituals are so deeply woven into life, they can protect morals from change, keeping them alive long after people forget why they were created in the first place. But they can also hide outdated or harmful values under the comfort of tradition, making them harder to question. You participate not just because you believe in the meaning, but because not participating would feel like breaking something sacred. In this way, rituals are not just expressions of morality, they are its guardians, silently passing judgment on those who follow them and those who dare to refuse. Sacredness is local. What one culture treats as sacred and untouchable, another might see as ordinary or not notice at all. In some places, a river is holy, its waters believed to carry the presence of the divine. In others, it's just a source of drinking water. A piece of cloth might be revered as a flag worth dying for in one country, yet hold no meaning in another. Entire species of animals are seen as sacred protectors in some societies, while in others they are hunted for food without hesitation. Sacredness is not written into the object itself. It is woven into it by human belief. These beliefs grow from history, religion, myth, and collective memory, and once they take root, they shape not only rituals but laws, customs, and the limits of what can be questioned. Breaking a sacred rule can provoke outrage, grief, or violence, not because of physical harm done, but because the act tears at something a community holds at the core of its identity. The most striking part is how absolute this sacredness feels to those within the culture. People defend it fiercely, sometimes without being able to fully explain why, only that it must be protected. Yet step outside that culture, and the object or practice might lose all its weight, becoming just a river, a cloth, or an animal again. This reveals a truth many resist. Sacredness is not a universal property of things, but a story humans tell about them. And when the story changes, or when it is not shared, what was once untouchable can become just another part of the ordinary world. Needs shape choices. We like to imagine our moral decisions are guided purely by principle, that no matter the situation, we will choose what is right. But when needs press hard enough, principles can bend, twist, or shatter entirely. Hunger can make theft feel like survival. Fear can make cruelty feel like protection. Love can make dishonesty feel like mercy. When the stakes are high enough, morality becomes less about ideals and more about getting through the moment alive, safe, or whole. History is full of moments when desperate need rewrote the rules. In times of famine, communities that once condemned stealing have celebrated it when it meant keeping children alive. In war, acts that would be crimes in peace, killing, lying, sabotage, are reframed as heroism. Even in everyday life, people make quiet moral compromises to protect their jobs, their families, their stability. The decision isn't always made with pride, but with the quiet understanding that survival often outranks virtue. This doesn't mean morality disappears when needs grow urgent. It means it adapts. People justify what they must do to meet those needs, convincing themselves it's the right thing, or at least the only possible thing. And in those moments, the moral line you thought was unbreakable can vanish under your feet, replaced by a new one drawn in the heat of necessity. It's a truth that's both sobering and haunting. When survival is on the line, right and wrong become negotiable, and it's often only after the crisis has passed that we look back and wonder if we chose morality, or if morality simply followed what we needed most. Religion guides rules. For billions of people, morality is inseparable from religion. The rules of right and wrong are not seen as human inventions, but as sacred commands handed down by gods, prophets, or divine law. These rules carry a weight unlike any other, because they are believed to come from a source higher than human judgment, a source that sees all, knows all, and will hold us accountable beyond this life. In this view, morality is not just about living well, it's about eternal destiny. Religion doesn't just tell people what to do, it shapes how they see the world. It decides what is holy and what is forbidden, what counts as virtue and what counts as sin. It draws the lines between purity and corruption, loyalty and betrayal, righteousness and evil. From dietary laws to rituals of worship, from marriage customs to justice systems, religious belief carves morality deep into the culture it touches. But because there are many religions, each with its own sacred texts and teachings, the moral codes they produce can be vastly different, sometimes even opposing. One faith may demand forgiveness above all else, while another may place divine justice at the center. Some elevate compassion as the highest virtue, others obedience, and each sees its rules as the truest reflection of the divine will. For believers, following these rules isn't simply a matter of personal choice, it's a matter of the soul. Disobedience is more than breaking a law, it's breaking faith with the eternal, and in that conviction lies religion's power. It doesn't just guide morals, it binds them to the deepest hopes and fears a human being can have. Myths shape good and evil. Long before laws were written or moral codes were debated, myths were the stories that taught people what to admire, what to fear, and what to hate. These tales, passed down through generations, do more than entertain. They define the boundaries of good and evil for the cultures that tell them. In one society's myths, the hero might be a cunning trickster who bends the rules to survive. In another, the hero might be a selfless martyr who sacrifices everything for others. Each story quietly teaches what virtues are prized and what sins are unforgivable. Myths sink deep into the collective mind. They give evil a face, often one that reflects a culture's deepest fears: a deceitful stranger, a corrupt ruler, a vengeful god. They make goodness tangible, often through figures who embody the ideals that culture wants its people to live by. Even when people no longer believe these stories literally, their moral blueprints remain, shaping how societies see justice, honor, and betrayal. The influence is subtle but powerful. A culture raised on myths, where rebellion is noble, may celebrate those who defy authority. A culture whose myths portray disobedience as the root of ruin may see the same act as dangerous or evil. The same deed can be celebrated in one land and cursed in another, not because of reasoned debate, but because of the old stories whispered into each culture's bones. When you realize myths shape good and evil, you see that morality isn't simply discovered, it is narrated, painted in heroes and villains, passed down until it feels like truth. And in that way, stories decide far more of our moral world than we dare to admit. Survival needs shape ethics. When survival is at stake, morality bends, sometimes to the point of breaking. The rules that feel unshakable in times of safety can crumble in the face of hunger, danger, or desperation. A society that lives under constant threat will praise courage, loyalty, and self-sacrifice because those traits keep the group alive. A community blessed with abundance might instead elevate compassion, fairness, and personal freedom because it can afford to. Survival needs do not just influence ethics, they create them. History is full of moments when necessity rewrote morality overnight. During famine, theft of food may be seen not as a crime, but as an act of survival. In war, killing the enemy can be honored as duty rather than condemned as murder. Even honesty, often held as a core virtue, can become a liability in environments where deception protects lives. The moral code shifts to match whatever keeps the people breathing for another day. This is not only true on a large scale, it shapes individuals too. People who swore they would never betray a friend, steal, or harm another can find themselves breaking those vows when faced with life or death choices. Survival has a way of stripping morality down to its most pragmatic form, leaving behind only the rules that serve the moment. It's an uncomfortable truth. What we think of as our morals may simply be the luxury of living in relative safety. Change the stakes, take away comfort, security, and abundance, and the ethics we cling to today might dissolve, replaced by ones we never imagined we could live by. Generosity differs. We like to think generosity is a universal virtue, that kindness, giving, and helping are understood the same way everywhere. But generosity is not just about what you give. It's about how, when, and why you give. And those rules are written differently in every culture. In some places, generosity means giving freely without expecting anything in return, often in quiet, unseen ways. In others, generosity is public and ceremonial, a way to inspire others or to show status. A gift given privately there might seem incomplete, even suspicious. What's considered generous can also depend on what a culture values most. In some communities, offering time and labor is the highest form of giving, while in others, material wealth carries the most weight. Even the act of receiving generosity is shaped by custom. Accepting too much in one place might be seen as gratitude, while in another, it could be seen as greed. Refusing an offer could be humility in one society, but a deep insult in another. Generosity is tied to identity, tradition, and social balance. In some cultures, giving creates an unspoken bond, a cycle of mutual care and obligation. In others, the highest generosity is the kind that leaves no debt behind. These differences mean that an act you see as deeply kind could be misunderstood or even disrespected by someone from another world of values. When generosity changes its meaning across borders, it forces you to see that kindness itself is not universal. It's a mirror reflecting the priorities of the people who give, the needs of the people who receive, and the invisible rules that tell them when giving is truly good. Judgment depends on view. Every moral judgment we make feels like it's rooted in truth, as if we're simply recognizing right and wrong the way we recognize light and dark. But the reality is far messier. Our judgments are shaped by the lens we look through, and that lens is built from our culture, experiences, beliefs, and emotions. Change the lens, and the judgment can change completely, even if the act we're judging stays the same. A protest can be seen as courageous resistance or dangerous chaos, depending on whether you agree with its cause. A punishment can feel like justice or cruelty, depending on whether you see the offender as a threat or a victim. Even something as universal as charity can be praised as generosity in one mind and criticized as enabling laziness in another. The facts may be identical, yet the moral verdict shifts with the perspective of the person passing it. This is why disagreements about morality can feel so impossible to resolve, because often people aren't arguing about the facts at all. They're arguing from different views of the world, shaped by different histories and values. To change someone's judgment, you often have to change the way they see the world itself. The haunting part is that this isn't just true for other people, it's true for us. We like to think our moral views are stable, but give us a new experience, a new truth, or even a new emotional wound, and the lens shifts, along with the judgments we thought were set in stone. Morals can conflict. We like to think morality is a straight path, guiding us clearly toward what's right. But in reality, moral values often collide, forcing us to choose between two rights or two wrongs. Protecting the truth can mean hurting someone you love. Showing mercy can mean denying justice to a victim. Loyalty to a friend can clash with loyalty to the law. In these moments, morality stops being a simple compass and becomes a battlefield where our values fight each other. These conflicts are not rare, they are woven into everyday life. A doctor may have to choose between respecting a patient's wishes and doing what might save their life. A parent might have to choose between fairness among their children and compassion for one who is struggling. The more deeply you hold your values, the more painful these choices become, because no matter what you do, you will betray something you believe in. Different cultures resolve these conflicts in different ways. One might choose truth over harmony, another harmony over truth. Some put justice above mercy, others mercy above justice. This is why the same moral dilemma can lead to opposite decisions, each seen as righteous by those who make them. The unsettling part is that there is often no clear resolution, just the knowledge that by saving one value, you've sacrificed another. And once you've faced such a choice, you realize morality is not a flawless map, but a series of competing roads where every step forward means leaving something important behind. Evil means different things. We speak the word evil as if it were a fixed, universal label for the darkest acts imaginable, but what one culture calls evil, another might see as necessity, duty, or even virtue. In some societies, defying a ruler is the height of morality. In others, it is treason, a crime so severe it marks a person as wicked. One nation may call war an act of liberation, while another sees it as pure destruction. The act itself doesn't change, only the story told about it does. Evil is not an objective force hovering over humanity. It is a judgment shaped by fear, history, and power. Those in control often define what is evil to strengthen their own rule, branding enemies, rebels, or dissenters as morally corrupt to justify silencing them. Entire groups have been demonized simply for being different, their existence painted as a threat to the moral order. Over time, these narratives become so deeply embedded that they feel like truth, even when they are just tools of control. The shifting nature of evil becomes clear when we look back at history. People once burned at the stake for heresy are now seen as visionaries. Leaders once celebrated for conquest are now remembered as ruthless tyrants. Yesterday's hero can be today's villain, and today's villain can be tomorrow's martyr. Once you see that evil is not an unchanging reality, but a cultural judgment, the world becomes less black and white. It forces a disturbing question into your mind. If the definition can change so easily, how can we ever be certain we are condemning the truly wicked, or just those our culture has taught us to fear? Autonomy is valued differently. In some places, autonomy, the freedom to make your own choices, live by your own rules, and shape your own life, is seen as the highest moral good. To be independent is to be strong, mature, and worthy of respect. Parents raise children to stand on their own, governments protect individual rights, and personal freedom is treated as sacred. But cross into another culture, and autonomy can lose its shine. There, the highest virtue might be interdependence, placing the needs of the family, the community, or the group above the desires of the individual. These differences are not just about preference, they shape entire moral systems. In individualist cultures, saying no to something that doesn't serve you can be seen as healthy self-respect. In collectivist cultures, the same refusal can be seen as selfishness, a failure to fulfill your duty to others. In one worldview, leaving home to pursue your own dreams is an admirable rite of passage. In another, staying close to care for your family is the truest sign of honor. Autonomy also shifts in value depending on context. In times of peace and abundance, independence is easier to prize. In times of hardship, survival often depends on deep cooperation, and self-reliance can seem reckless or even dangerous. The meaning of autonomy isn't written into human nature. It's written by the values, struggles, and priorities of the society you live in. And when two worlds meet, each may see the other's moral ideal as deeply flawed, one calling it selfishness, the other calling it dependence. In the end, autonomy's worth depends entirely on who's holding the pen. Groups may outweigh individuals. In some moral systems, the needs of the group are placed above the wants, or even the rights, of the individual. Sacrificing personal freedom, comfort, or safety becomes not just expected, but virtuous if it means preserving the stability, honor, or survival of the collective. In these societies, morality is measured not by how well you serve yourself, but by how well you serve us. This can create acts of breathtaking selflessness. Soldiers go to war knowing they may never return. Parents give up their own food so their children can eat. Communities pool their resources to save one member in crisis. The individual suffers, but the group survives, and in the group's eyes, that sacrifice is the highest form of moral good. But this same principle can also justify crushing the individual. Dissent can be silenced, personal dreams can be denied, and those who refuse to conform can be branded selfish or dangerous. When the group's well-being is the highest priority, personal happiness becomes negotiable, even expendable. The line between noble sacrifice and forced obedience blurs, and the moral weight shifts depending on who is holding the scale. What makes this truth so striking is how naturally it feels right or wrong, depending on where you're standing. In cultures built on tight-knit survival, the group's strength is everything. In individualistic cultures, the idea of sacrificing yourself for the collective can feel oppressive. Yet, both believe they are moral, both believe they are protecting what matters most, and both can look at the other and see only misplaced values. Justice systems differ. We speak of justice as if it were a single, unshakable idea, but in truth, every society builds its own version of it, and those versions can be worlds apart. In one country, justice may mean punishing wrongdoers with harsh public consequences to deter others. In another, it may mean rehabilitating offenders and returning them to society as quickly as possible. Some systems see justice as retribution, others as restoration, and each believes their way is the truest reflection of fairness. These differences are not just in theory, they are in the way lives are shaped every day. A theft in one place might lead to years in prison. In another, it might be resolved with repayment and an apology. In some nations, justice is a sacred process overseen by religious law, while in others it is a secular negotiation grounded in human rights. Even the symbols of justice, the blindfolded statue, the scales, the sword, take on meanings that shift with cultural values. The most striking part is how each system feels complete and unquestionable to those who live under it. People raised in one legal framework often see others as too soft, too brutal, too chaotic, or too slow, never realizing that their own system is just one of many possible answers to the same human problems. When justice systems differ so widely, it forces a sobering thought. Perhaps justice is not a universal truth, but a local invention shaped by the history, fears, and ideals of the people who designed it, and by the power of those who enforce it. Rights are negotiated. We like to imagine rights as permanent, unquestionable truths, gifts we are born with, guaranteed simply because we exist. But in reality, rights are bargains struck between people, enforced only as long as those in power agree to honor them. They are not unshakable laws of nature. They are agreements that can be expanded, restricted, or erased, depending on who sits at the table and how much leverage they have. Every right we enjoy today was fought for, argued over, and ultimately granted through negotiation. The right to vote, to speak freely, to own property, to marry who we choose, none of these emerged fully formed from the fabric of the universe. They were demanded by some, resisted by others, and shaped through compromise, struggle, and sometimes bloodshed. And the fact that they were won means they can be lost. This is why rights are not distributed equally across the world. One country may recognize healthcare as a basic human right. Another may treat it as a privilege. The right to protest may be celebrated in one place and punished in another. These differences aren't because human beings are inherently entitled to different freedoms. They're because different negotiations produced different outcomes. What makes this truth unsettling is its fragility. Rights exist only for as long as they are defended, and they can vanish quietly, not always with a loud announcement, but through slow erosion. Once you realize rights are negotiated, you understand something sobering. They are not the floor we stand on. They are the rope we're holding on to, and that rope can be pulled away. Crime is culture-based. We think of crime as something clear-cut, an obvious line between what's acceptable and what's punishable. But that line is drawn by culture, not carved into the fabric of the universe. What's considered a crime in one place can be perfectly legal, even encouraged, in another. Drinking alcohol can earn you prison time in some countries and barely a second glance in others. Speaking against the government might be a constitutional right in one society and a dangerous act of treason in another. Even acts like marriage, trade, or protest can be celebrated as freedoms in one land and criminalized in another. Crime is not simply about harm. It's about the values a culture chooses to protect. Laws reflect the fears, priorities, and moral judgments of the people who make them. In some societies, crimes are tied to religion, rooted in the idea of protecting sacred order. In others, they're shaped by economic systems designed to protect property and profit. The same behavior can be called immoral, illegal, or perfectly acceptable, depending on whose rules you live under. The most unsettling part is how natural these rules feel from the inside. People grow up believing their criminal laws are obvious truths that anyone, anywhere would agree. But the moment you step outside your cultural borders, those truths can disappear. You see that crime isn't a universal category. It's a shifting agreement, a map of forbidden actions that changes from place to place, time to time. And when you realize that even the idea of a criminal depends on where you're standing, the moral certainty around law begins to unravel. Pride shapes judgment. Pride has a way of weaving itself into morality so subtly that we often can't see it. It's not just about feeling good about ourselves, it's about defending the beliefs, values, and traditions that make up our identity. When pride is tied to morality, we don't just think something is right. We need it to be right, because admitting otherwise would mean questioning who we are. This is why people can cling to moral positions, even when evidence, reason, or compassion suggest they should reconsider. A nation proud of its history may deny the injustice in its past because accepting it would crack the image it holds of itself. A person raised to believe in a certain tradition may defend it fiercely, not just out of loyalty, but out of fear that letting it go would strip away a part of their identity. Pride doesn't just influence what we believe, it dictates what we're willing to admit might be wrong. The most dangerous part is that pride can make morality unmovable. Instead of asking, "Is this truly right?" we ask, "What would it mean for me if this wasn't right?" And the answer to that question can be so painful that we'd rather hold on to the belief than face the possibility of being wrong. But pride doesn't always harden judgment. It can also soften it. Pride in compassion, fairness, or justice can inspire people to live up to their ideals. The challenge is knowing when our moral stance is driven by genuine conviction and when it's simply the voice of pride refusing to let go. Virtues are ranked differently. We often talk about virtues, honesty, courage, loyalty, kindness, as if they are universally agreed upon and equally valued everywhere. But step into another culture and you'll quickly see that not only can the list of virtues change, but their order of importance can shift entirely. In one society, loyalty to family might outrank truth-telling, even if it means protecting someone who has done wrong. In another, honesty might be held above all, even if it destroys relationships. These rankings are not random. They grow from the needs and history of the people who hold them. A community that has faced centuries of external threats may elevate unity and obedience as its highest virtues, while one built on trade and negotiation might prize fairness and transparency above all. What's seen as a noble sacrifice in one place could be seen as foolishness in another. The consequences of these rankings are everywhere. In business, politics, and daily life, people's choices are shaped not just by what they value, but by how much they value it compared to everything else. This is why someone from a culture that prizes politeness above blunt truth may see direct speech as rude, while someone from a truth-first culture may see politeness as dishonesty. The unsettling truth is that we often judge others as immoral when they are simply following a different hierarchy of virtues. And once you see that even our highest ideals are arranged differently depending on where we live, it becomes harder to believe there's one correct moral order for everyone. Truth is human-made. We like to believe truth exists outside of us, pure, eternal, untouched by human hands. But the reality is that much of what we call truth is built by people, shaped by the limits of our perception, the bias of our language, and the power of those who tell the story. Facts may exist, but the way we select them, frame them, and agree upon their meaning is a human act. Two cultures can witness the same event and record entirely different truths, each convinced they are preserving reality itself. From the moment we are born, we inherit truths that have already been decided for us. Truths about history, morality, identity, and the world's order. These are taught not as opinions, but as unquestionable realities. Yet if you step into another society, you may find their truths contradict yours completely, and they will defend theirs with the same certainty
You defend yours. The contradiction isn't proof that one side is lying. It's proof that truth is built, not simply found. Even science, often seen as the purest path to truth, is filtered through human interpretation. Data must be gathered, analyzed, and explained, all by people with their own perspectives and priorities. What is accepted as scientific truth in one era can be overturned in the next, not because reality has changed, but because our construction of it has. Once you see truth as human-made, it loses its illusion of permanence. You begin to realize that what you know is not a flawless reflection of the world, but a carefully crafted version of it, one that could be rewritten the moment a different storyteller takes the pen. Morals exist only in society. We often speak of morality as if it floats above humanity, an eternal force that would exist even if we vanished. But strip away the people, the language, the shared stories, and morality disappears. In the wilderness, there is no right or wrong, only survival. A predator does not commit murder, a tree does not commit theft, and the wind is not immoral for destroying a home. Morals are born only where humans live together, because they are the rules we invent to make that living possible. Society creates morality out of necessity. Without it, there is no framework to decide how to treat one another, no shared understanding of justice, no common expectations of fairness or loyalty. These rules, what we can do, what we must never do, are forged in the conversations, traditions, and compromises of people trying to coexist, and they feel so natural, so absolute, that it's easy to forget they are human-made. But morality's dependence on society also makes it fragile. When societies change, their morals shift with them. What was once a binding truth can vanish in a generation, replaced by something entirely different. Take away the community that agrees to enforce a moral rule, and the rule collapses. Without people to believe in it, morality simply doesn't exist. This is what makes morality both powerful and unsettling. It's not an eternal truth handed down by the universe. It's a social invention held together only by the collective belief of those who live under it. Outside of society's walls, morality has no home, no voice, and no meaning at all.